A great morning to you. Yeah, we can safely say we're in November now. 4th of November.
Can you believe it? And tomorrow is the 5th of November.
That's my dad's birthday, actually.
Really?
Yeah.
It's a big day in the UK, but other people in the world celebrate it, and I've never been able to understand it. Guy Fawkes Night.
Oh, yeah.
But why?
We used to in the 90s
but
as
why?
kids.
I don't understand.
80s and 90s.
Such a British thing. Ish, I could see.
Colonization, I tell you. So we'll be looking at a few stories. One of them is the new data from the second quarter of the 2025 Business Partners Limited SME Confidence Index is showing a rise in optimism among South Africans for small and medium enterprises. And we go to Nigeria, where the military there continues its campaign against the Lakurawa, an Islamic State-linked terrorist group that has entrenched itself in the country's northwest near the border with Niger. Those stories and more, of course, will be coming up. We also get our analysis of what's happening in the Central African region of the continent. It's Central African today, right? No. It's East African today. East African section of our continent. And we'll be speaking to an analyst on that who joins us on Tuesdays. So all of that and more coming up.
But first, here's your news as we say good morning to Onele Nsinsi. And that'll be followed by the sports headlines with Musibudi Rachel Makura.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Well, thank you, Peter, and a very good morning to our listeners. The military commander who has ruled Guinea since a coup 4 years ago has entered the presidential race. Colonel Mamadi Doumbouya has broken an earlier promise to hand power over to civilian government. Doumbouya submitted his candidacy at the Supreme Court yesterday, flanked by soldiers and wearing black sunglasses. He did not make any public comment. Two of Guinea's biggest opposition parties, the RPG and the UFDG, have been excluded from the December contest. This has raised concern about the election's credibility. People in Tanzania have been sharing images of bodies strewn on the streets after the violence that followed last week's election. Access to the internet was blocked until yesterday afternoon, hours after Samia Suluhu Hassan was sworn in for her second term as president. She insists that the poll was free and fair, but the opposition has described it as a sham. A diplomatic source says there's credible evidence that about 500 people were killed. The UN Migration Agency says tens of thousands of people have been trying to flee the city of Al Fashir in Sudan. This after the paramilitary RSF seized it from the army over a week ago. Many are trying to reach Tawali, where aid agencies are offering help. Eyewitnesses say the RSF has killed some people, while others, especially young men suspected of belonging to the Sudanese army, have been captured and abused. The BBC's Barbara Plett-Asher reports.
Outrage about reports of mass killings in Al Fashir, apparently documented by his paramilitary fighters in social media videos. He said he was sorry for the disaster that had befallen the people of Al Fashir and admitted there had been violations by his forces, which would be investigated by a committee that's now arrived in the city. The RSF denies widespread allegations that the killings in Al Fashir are ethnically motivated and follow a pattern of the Arab paramilitaries targeting non-Arab populations. Activists have also stepped up demands for international pressure on the United Arab Emirates, which is accused of providing military support to the RSF.
Lastly, the U.S. President Donald Trump has stepped up his campaign against Zoran Mamdani, the Democrat, who is favorite to win today's election to be mayor of New York City. In a social media post, Trump says he would be unlikely to contribute more than the legal minimum of federal funds to New York if Mamdani wins. But speaking at his final campaign rally, Mamdani hit back at Trump.
Everything that comes out of Donald Trump's mouth as if it is already legal just by virtue of who is saying it. And it is time to finally stand up to the bullies that make these threats, not to become the bullies ourselves. And we've seen time and time again that the best way to respond to Donald Trump and to defeat these kinds of threats is to actually stand up and fight back.
For any news stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom at channelafrica.co.za or call us at +27 11 714 4459. Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Nsinsi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
And coming up in your sports news, South Africa off to a thumping win at the Under-17 FIFA World Cup, while Elina Rybakina stands eager short tag to progress to the WTA finals. Details coming up at the bottom of the hour.
Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
Let me start. Okay, so it's 6 minutes past 6 Central African Time, which means it's time for us to take a look at what's happening, what has happened in the last 24 hours across the continent in what we like to call the Africa Roundup. And here we bring you all the news in a concise format to keep you up to date and also set you up for the news day ahead. And we begin with this story where Sudan, more than 60,000 people are on the move as fighting spreads beyond the Darfur region. The surge in violence follows the Rapid Support Forces takeover of El Fasher, the army's last stronghold in Darfur. Just over a week ago, the United Nations Security Council warned of catastrophic conditions and urged the RSF to halt acts of revenge against civilians. Naba Muhaddin reports from Port Sudan.
The situation in Al Fasher city remains very concerning amid reports of RSF taking hostages and not allowing civilians to flee from the city. Doctors Without Borders charity organization confirmed that the number of people who are fleeing from Al Fasher is decreasing, and actually they accused RSF of not allowing people to go out from the city. The number of people who fled the violence that emerged after RSF captured the city of Al Fasher last Sunday right now has reached 70,000 people. Most of them are women and children. The violence in Al Fasher is unprecedented. Recent reports, satellite reports, confirm that mass killing and ethnic cleansing continues in Al Fasher city, and actually RSF are denying all of the accusations of these atrocities.
The Red Cross has warned that history is repeating itself in Sudan's Darfur region following reports of mass killings after El Fasher fell to the Rapid Support Forces last week. With the army's stronghold in Darfur gone, the RSF now effectively controls more than a quarter of the country.
It becomes worse every time a place is taken over by the other party.
Mirjana Spoljaric was speaking after the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, or RSF, seized Al Fasher last week.
There are many tens of thousands more that we assume are still in Al Fasher and have no access to food, water, or medical assistance that they need very urgently. You have to bear in mind that most of the health system in Sudan has collapsed, and definitely not in Darfur. So whilst people are being wounded, there's no means to treat them.
Spoljaric said the ICRC was extremely concerned about reports of a suspected massacre at the Saudi hospital. It was the long-besieged city's last known functioning medical facility.
Nigeria has said that it would welcome support from the United States, provided its territorial integrity is respected. This comes after the US President Donald Trump threatened military action over alleged violence against Christians, a claim Nigeria has denied. Officials say that the situation is an opportunity to engage with Washington and find common ground. Nigeria's President Bola Tinubu's advisor is Daniel Bwalya.
The report or notion that there is a Christian persecution or genocide in Nigeria is false. False both from the premise and the conclusion. It is not supported by data. I personally have a feeling that in the next couple of days they are going to have a sit down together, and then we will find a common front in this fight against insecurity. If you go to Africa, people respect Donald Trump because when it comes to fight against terrorism, he has never minced word. He has never He was never politically correct about it. He's willing to fight it, and that's all we ask for. Leaders that can be very straightforward in that regard and willing to collaborate with you in that fight.
Leaders of South Africa's 10-party government of national unity have met at a 2-day retreat on the outskirts of Johannesburg. They have pledged to prioritize key areas of focus and have signed the newly ratified terms of reference for the GNU and its clearinghouse mechanism. President of South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa, has more.
Well, we've just concluded a really excellent and meaningful GNU leaders meeting. It's a retreat, really. We spent a considerable amount of time together talking about the state of the country as it is now, state of the society, state of politics, international issues, and we reflected on many issues, particularly those issues that are a great problem to our people, like unemployment, like hunger that we see spreading in some of our provinces. We spoke about corruption, we spoke about crime, and we spoke about what we need to do to inject more growth into our economy.
And that's how we come to an end of today's Africa Roundup. This comes after the 6 a.m. news on Channel Africa. Rise and shine. So we'll be doing this again tomorrow. Coming up, though, we take a deeper look at some of those stories that we did touch on the Africa Roundup, as well as new ones, but focusing on the East African region with our analyst, Dennis Beru. He'll be in conversation with Peter. Stay tuned.
In this episode of Channel Africa Conversations, Peter talks to Dr. Tulisile Buddha, an academic, author, and an expert in indigenous knowledge systems. Join us for a compelling discussion on preserving African languages and traditions in the digital era. Dr. Tulisile unpacks the role of educators, explorers, and how technologies like AI can support cultural preservation, and challenges us to rethink how we honor African heritage. You can find the episode on YouTube, SABC Plus, and on our website, channelafrica.co.za. This episode is a must-listen for educators, creators, and change makers across the continent. Channel Africa, the African perspective. The sound of Africa is evolving. Experience our new mobile app. Free to download, free to connect. New day, new stories. Start your morning right with Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Now, to look at some of the stories making headlines in the East Africa region, we'll be unpacking key developments across the region, from the disputed election and mass protests in Tanzania, a tragic landslide in Kenya's Rift Valley, the launch of Kenya-Uganda's digital partnership, and Ethiopia's appeal for mediation in its border tensions with Eritrea, and also a surprise handover of SADC presidency by Madagascar, as well as a deepening fuel crisis in Malawi exacerbated by unrest in Tanzania. And to unpack all of that for us is one of our regular commentators from East Africa, and that's Dennis Beru, who is a journalist and team leader at Grassroots Journalism in Kenya. A very good morning to you, Dennis.
Good morning, Peter Ndoro. How are you?
Fiti sana, habari yako?
Salama sana, uko mzima.
So good to hear you. So let's start in Tanzania. President Suluhu Hassan has been sworn in, but opposition parties have dismissed the election results, and the deadly protests that seem to be continuing. A lot of people not happy with what has played out.
Thank you so much, Peter Ndoro. Of course, yesterday we saw President Samia Suluhu sworn in at a ceremony limited to invited guests following a disputed election that sparked a deadly protest after two main opposition candidates were barred from running. Of course, the ceremony was held on a government-owned ground in the administrative capital city of Dodoma, a departure from the past when President took oath at a packed football stadium that were open to the public. But of course, the tension remained high in the commercial capital, Dar es Salaam, following the 3 day of election protest. Gas station and grocery, of course, shops were closed, with the streets nearly empty as government employees continued to work from home in the Doma. Most of the people, of course, stayed at home. And remember, Peter Ndoro, the October 29th election was marked by violence as demonstrators took to the streets of major cities to protest the poll and stop counting of the votes. Of course, the military were deployed to help police who were overwhelmed to quell the riots. So internet and, of course, connectivity had been off in East Africa's nation, disrupting travel and other activities. And of course, yesterday's swearing in a private um, um, ceremony, of course, has a lot of queries because we have seen, commentators comment on the swearing in of Mama Samia Suluhu Hassan. And of course, Mama Samia Suluhu Hassan won by 98% of votes. That is around 31 million votes. But now the questions, many people are asking themselves, why have these ceremony of course, by invited guests, and we've been seeing Tanzanian having these ceremonies in public. Of course, the government has also postponed the reopening of universities that was set for November that, and the authorities have not said how many people were killed or injured in the violence. The spokesperson of the United Nations Human Rights Office, Saif Magongo, on Friday told the UN briefing in Geneva by video from Kenya that there were incredible reports of 10 deaths in Dar es Salaam and Shinyanga and Morogoro towns. Election results were rejected by the main opposition party, Chadema, whose main opposition party chief, Tundu Lissu, is still behind the bar.
I guess big questions then must be asked about why she would have it pretty much behind closed doors. If she enjoys 90+% support of the country, why wouldn't she be inaugurated in front of her people instead of hidden away? And do we know who came in terms of presidents for her inauguration?
Of course, Peter Ndoro, the ceremony being held behind, of course, the closed doors, let me call so, actually is because the tension that that has witnessed in Tanzania, and of course, we saw quite a number of invited guests, and of course, President William Ruto had to send his representative, Deputy President Kithure Kindiki, to represent him in the ceremony. Of course, we also had other guests from Burundi, Zambia, Mozambique, and also Uganda. Of course, we've seen the East African presidents congratulating Mama Samia Suluhu for a massive victory, because this has never happened in Tanzania, a president winning by such a huge margin. And to the surprise is that all the 16 other presidential candidates who vied for this position also attended the ceremony.
Okay, let's move to Kenya, where this landslide has claimed at least 26 lives, we're told. What factors are at play? Is it climate change, infrastructure issues, or not adequate emergency response?
Peter Ndoro is so sad that, of course, the death toll from a landslide in the Rift Valley side of Kenya, of course, has risen to 26. This is as per the government spokesperson on Sunday following heavy rain on Saturday. Of course, 25 people were still missing, and 26 other had been rescued after the devastating floods in Elgeyo Marakwet County. And as per the government spokesman, Isaac Maura, most of the rescued people were receiving treatment. And of course, government has deployed military planes, disaster response specialists to conduct search and rescue operations. And of course, this is Rift Valley is prone to landslides, and recently we have seen as in some areas that of course we've seen floods, eastern part of Kenya. Of course, in last year we saw 61 people killed in a mudslide in the central part of Kenya. Of course, this is due to the changing in the weather pattern, and of course climate related issues. Of course, Elgeyo Marakwet is not far to the eastern Uganda, where we've been seeing mudslide recently. Of course, we saw 13 people killed in Uganda, according to the Red Cross. That is last week. And of course, Rift Valley, we've seen the climate effect has really affected the now overflowing lakes. For instance, we have two lakes that are now they are now full, and some of the lakes are Lake Nakuru and Lake Bogoria, and also Lake Elementaita, where people have been forced to move from the nearby areas that are being affected by heavy flooding.
Tell us a little bit more about this new digital partnership between Kenya and Uganda. How significant is this agreement, and what is it meant to do?
Of course, Kenya and Uganda have taken a very bold step towards signing an agreement to advance technologies such as network, ICT training, and of course, cyber security and digital literacy. Of course, the collaboration will commence immediately with technical teams from both countries working closely together. Of course, the MOU was finalized during a meeting that included John Mbadi, the Cabinet Secretary for Treasury and planning, and a representative from the Angola overseeing telecommunication and information technologies. And we also had Joyce Ahamsimwa Maisi, the Kenyan ambassador to Angola. The partnership also aims to accelerate ICT cooperation between the two countries. Of course, while reflecting on the recent visit to Angola for the transformative week for the Financing Africa's Infrastructure Development, John Tanui, the Kenya's principal secretary for the State Department of ICT and digital technology, of course, noted the impactful discussion he engaged, including the ministerial dialogue, strategy, bilateral meeting, cultural exchange, and of course, interaction. And remember, Peter Ndoro, Uganda will be now housing one of the AI sites in Africa, and of course, this is a very huge step towards advancing technology in the East Africa region. And of course, Kenya is also looking at ensuring that they increase their broadband expansion, as well as the importance of policy and public-private partnership reforms to, of course, attract investors and mobilize capital for data center, fiber optic and networks, and of course, internet exchange points, IXPS.
All right, let's go to Madagascar now. Very interesting to see Madagascar relinquish its SADC presidency. Of course, former President Rajoelina had to flee, and the parliament essentially kicked him out. How unusual is this? Have we ever had this before, where the presidency of SADC is resigned or relinquished by the country that's holding the presidency?
Because Peter Ndoro, we've never seen these before in any regional bloc, but for the Malagasy, we really understand because just barely a few weeks when the President Andre Rajoelina was now overthrown and fled the country. Of course, through the government statement on November 1st, of course, decided not to assume, or Malagasy government decided not to assume the rotating presidency for the SADC, which former President Andre Rajoelina was supposed to hold until July 2026. Of course, the relinquishment stems from the fact that the country had been facing a wave of protests and major political crisis since September. Of course, this now led to the dissolution of the main state institution by the armed forces. Of course, they have faced, instability. New Malagasy authorities are now demonstrating that their commitment to turning the page on the institutional situation, and of course, they'll have now to embark on a broader process of refounding. This is one of the reasons why they had to relinquish the chairmanship of the SADC. Of course, they're now trying to refocus on refounding the country after a few weeks of protest and clashes that saw a number of young people killed, and of course, our president fleeing at the country. Of course, they're trying to ensure that the process of bringing together all the nation vital forces to foster a dialogue and, of course, secure the support of the bilateral and multilateral partners. Of course, SADC is one of the partners that we are talking about.
Dennis, we've run out of time, but very briefly, what can you tell us about this fuel shortage in Malawi now? Because neighboring Tanzania, this unrest has seen fuel tankers unable to cross into the country. A crisis for the new president, Mutharika, to try and deal with. I mean, fuel was already a problem, wasn't it?
Of course, Peter Ndoro, fuel was an issue before Mutharika came into power, and the Tanzania protests have really hit this landlocked country. And of course, Malawi noted that the berthing of the vessel that had been suspended, affecting the clearance of the 48 million liters of diesel and petrol from Matanga, destined for Malawi. Of course, according to the statement of by the Tanzanian government, had assured Malawi that the fuel will soon be cleared from the ports of Tanga and Dar es Salaam. Of course, Malawi government they had to look for the alternative routes to ensure that they don't lack this basic commodity. And of course, they are looking at the ports of Nacala and Beira in Mozambique, and of course, Sasa in Zimbabwe, to ensure that, of course, there are no lack of fuel shortage, because this is the country that has had, a lack of fuel supplies recently. And of course, yeah.
All right, my brother, we're going to have to leave it there, unfortunately. We always run out of time because there's so much going on in East Africa. But listening to you and your updates, always a pleasure. Thanks so much, Dennis.
Asante sana, Peter Ndoro.
Asante sana, kwaheri. That's Dennis Beru, our brother in East Africa, who's a journalist and team leader of grassroots journalism Kenya, giving us an update on what's been playing out in the region there. It's 8:30. No, 8:30. I wish it was 8:30. It's 6:30 Central African time. And here's a look at your news headlines with Onel Nsinsi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. In your headlines, the military commander who has ruled Guinea since a coup 4 years ago has entered the presidential race. Colonel Mamadi Doumbouya has broken an earlier promise to hand power to a civilian government. People in Tanzania have been sharing images of bodies strewn on the streets after the violence that followed last week's election. Samia Suluhu Hassan was sworn in for her second term as president yesterday, and she insists that the poll was free and fair. And U.S. President Donald Trump has played down the possibility of a U.S. war with Venezuela, but suggested President Nicolas Maduro's days as the country's president are numbered. Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Nsinsi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Now, let's check in with the world of sports. We get our first full sports bulletin from Musubudi Makura for this Tuesday morning.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you so much, Asanda. Very good morning from the sports desk. We'll start here. So South Africa claimed its first ever win at a FIFA Under-17 World Cup, this beating Bolivia 3-1 in Qatar on the tournament's opening day yesterday. Emil Witbooi, Neo Bohloko, as well as Sean Els, each netted for Amajimbos, despite an early red card to Sive Pama. Now, the head coach, Vela Kumaro's charges showed grit as well as determination to power past the South American nation on the tournament's opening day, despite playing with 10 men on the park from the 36th minute. Now, both goalkeepers were kept busy during the first half, with Bolivia taking 11 shots at South African goal in the first period, while Bolivia faced 6 shots from South Africa. So with one win in the bag, Amajimbos will face the host nation Qatar in their second game of the tournament on Thursday. Well, a thrilling rematch between reigning champions Pyramids FC of Egypt as well as Moroccan giants RS Bakan will headline the 2025-2026 Total Energies CAF Champions League group stages after the official draw was conducted in Johannesburg on Monday. So let's take a look at the groups in the CAF Champions League. So Group A has RS Bakan of Morocco, the defending champions Pyramids FC of Egypt, Rivers United of Nigeria, as well as Power Dynamos of Zambia. Group B will see Al Ali, record champions of Egypt, Young Africans of Tanzania, AS FAR of Morocco, as well as JS Kabila of Algeria battling it out, while Group C has defending former champion, should I say, and South African side Mamelodi Sundowns, Al Hilal of Sudan, MC Alger of Algeria, as well as Saint Elolopopo of the Democratic Republic of Congo, while Group D has Esperance Sportive de Tunis of Tunisia, Simba FC of Tanzania, Petro de Luanda of Angola, as well as Stade Milian of Mali. Also on the same day, the CAF Confederation Cup draw also took place. We'll get to see an Egyptian derby in the group stages of the tournament after Zamalek as well as Al Masry were paired together. Group A has USM Algiers of Algeria, Jobolia AC de Mamako of Mali, Olympique Club de Safi of Morocco, as well as Fan San Pedro of Cote d'Ivoire. Group B, Wydad Casablanca, AS Manema, Azam FC of Tanzania, as well as Nairobi United of Kenya, while Group C has CR Belouizdad of Algeria, Stellenbosch FC from South Africa, AS Otono of Congo, as well as Singida Black Stars of Tanzania. Group D, Zamalek, Al Masry of Egypt, Kaizer Chiefs from South Africa, as well as Zesco United of Zambia. On to some tennis news now. Elina Rybakina stand Iga Swiatek to confirm her place in the knockout stages of the WTA finals, while Amanda Anisimova of the USA produced a comeback victory to stay in contention in Riyadh. Now, former Wimbledon champion Rybakina was outplayed in the opening set against the world number 2 Swiatek, but completely dominated after that. 6-seed Rybakina won 12 of the final 13 games to storm to a 3-6, 6-1, 6-love win win and also snap a 4-match losing streak against Swiatek, while American Amanda Anisimova later beat Madison Keys, her compatriot, to send Rybakina through to the semi-finals. Anisimova battled back from a set as well as a breakdown to beat compatriot Keys 4-6, 6-3 and 6-2 and set up a winner-takes-all final group match against Poland's Iga Swiatek on Wednesday. So let's hear what Rybakina had to say after beating Iga Swiatek.
Yeah, it's always very tough to play against Iga. She brings so much intensity on the court, and I feel like she started really well the match, and I was a little bit slow. So the serve straight away, she broke me, so it was difficult to be down. But in the second set, I pushed myself, the serve improved, and really happy that I stepped in and played better each point. So very happy with the performance, and thank you so much for support.
And finally, two-time Olympic champion Eliud Kipchoge says he'll run 7 marathons on 7 continents over the next 2 years to raise funds for causes he believes in, even as he continues to race at the elite level. So Kipchoge's world tour was announced after the Kenyan great, a former world record holder, finished the New York Marathon on Sunday, crossing the line in 17th place in 2 hours, 14 minutes and 36 seconds to cheers from the Central Park crowd. Now, before Sunday's race, Kipchoge had told Olympics.com that he wanted to run in Antarctica, saying his new project was rather a chance to do that extreme thing that can make someone work harder. Kipchoge, by the way, turns 41 today, said in a statement that his globe-trottering project will let him compete not only for records, but for the people. And that's a wrap from the sports desk at the Sawa. It's 6:37 a.m. Central African Time. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, our email address is newsroom@channelafrica.co.za, or give us a call on +27 11714 4459. I'm back with more sports news in the next hour with Channel Africa Sport. I am Musibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Gratitude begins with a story. Find yours on Channel Africa. Now streaming on our new website and mobile app. Your life, your rhythm, your Africa. Channel Africa. Find it for free on Google Play and the Apple App Store.
It's time now for us to take a first look at what's been happening in the world of business, economics and commerce. And at the Business News Desk is Chanduko Ligege. Good morning.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning. The National Union of Mine Workers of South Africa, NUM, has kicked off wage negotiations at power utility Eskom with a 15% salary increase demand for its members. Other demands include the company's medical aid contribution of 80%. The current 7% multi-year agreement comes to an end in June next year. The union has said that talks could be complicated by Eskom changes to collective bargaining after the entity was unbundled into 3 divisions. Eskom has proposed that the 3 entities establish their own union recognition agreements. NUM says the move goes against collective bargaining and will frustrate wage talks at Eskom. Ribuwani Mamburu is the union's national spokesperson.
Is firm on its demand for a 15% wage increase for Eskom employees, a figure justified by high costs of living. We stand in solidarity with other unions that are organizing at Eskom in demanding that negotiations remain within the Central Bargaining Forum. Eskom and government must understand that the unbundling of Eskom must not be used to unbundle workers' unity.
The Socio-Economic Rights Institute in South Africa, SERI, has welcomed the South Gauteng High Court ruling that the city of Johannesburg accelerate the process of verifying and registering informal traders. This after SERI took the city to court last week over the forced removals of scores of hawkers. The city removed the street traders for violating bylaws, saying they operated without permits and in areas not designated for trading. SERI's legal counsel, Deborah Ratuba, says they are pleased with the ruling.
The judgment is basically instructing parties to mediate in terms of Rules 41A. And I think as Syria, we're happy with that because we always wanted to engage the city and, have meaningful consultations. So mediation will basically force the city and informal traders to come to the fore and bring all their concerns and hopefully hash things out in a way that won't need us to return. So basically the registration process is supposed to run now, meaning the normal trader should be able to go to the city.
A report released by the Confederation of Zimbabwe Industry, CZI, has revealed that the country's annual inflation rate could halve from the current levels by the end of 2025, driven by a stable local currency supported by high gold prices. Annual inflation in Zimbabwe measured in the ZiG currency fell sharply to 32.7% in October from 82.7% in September. The CZI expects inflation to decline further, potentially reaching between 15% and 20% by December 2025. This projection is attributed to negative month-on-month inflation in recent months and a stable ZiG currency bolstered by surging gold prices. The world's big manufacturing economies struggled to fire up in October as weak U.S. demand and President Donald Trump's tariffs hit factory orders. Business surveys currently show that zone factory activity stagnated as new orders flatlined and headcount fell, its Purchasing Managers Index showed, and its exporting powerhouse Germany little sign of recovery with production growth slowing again. France's manufacturing sector remained weak while Italy's contracted marginally. Spain stood out among the bloc's big four economies as its factories expanded at a faster pace than in September. In other news, Microsoft has struck a $9.7 billion deal with data center operator Iran that includes access to NVIDIA's advanced chips. The deal aims to ease the computing crunch that has kept the tech giant from fully cashing in on the artificial intelligence boom. The news sent shares of Iran up more than 20% in pre-market trading today. AI server maker Dell rose 5% as it would provide Iran with NVIDIA's GB300 chips and other equipment Microsoft will use for about $5.8 billion. Now let's shift our focus to financial indicators at this hour. $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,436 naira. In Botswana, 13 pula 70. Kenya, the dollar is 128 shilling 20. Zambia, 22 kwacha 8. BRICS countries, $1 in Brazil is at 5 real 38. In Russia, 79 rubles 55. India, 80 rupee 80. China, 71.12. South Africa, 17 rand 31 cents. $1 is 76 pence to the British pound, 87 to the euro. Commodities, gold is at $3,991, platinum at $1,564 per ounce. The price of Brent crude oil at $64.67 a barrel. That's all for now. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za, or you can call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I am Chandruko Ligege.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. G20 in Africa, exclusive to Channel Africa.
Time now for our G20 fact for this morning. Did you know that the G20 Summit 2025 will be held from 22nd to 23rd November 2025 in Johannesburg, South Africa, under the theme of Solidarity, Equality, Sustainability? Formed by 19 countries and 2 regional bodies, the European Union and the African Union, the G20 is an informal group with no permanent staff. Decisions are based on consensus and influence national policies and international bodies like the World Bank and IMF without having enforcement power. And driving to work today, I started seeing some posters, so I think the vibe is picking up now for us to host the G20. I was excited to see that. Things are changing.
Well, it is a big event. I don't know that people understand just how big it is.
Yeah.
But I suspect once the leaders start coming in, there will be a sense and appreciation. I do hope that it does come with something positive for the African continent. So we keep our fingers crossed for that. And you can believe we're going to be covering that wall to wall for you right here on Channel Africa.
Absolutely. And that's our G20 facts for this morning.
G20 in Africa, exclusive to Channel Africa, championing Africa through solidarity, equality, and sustainability. Start your day right with Channel Africa Breakfast.
That smells delicious.
Live, 5 days a week.
It's International Stress Awareness Week, observed from the 3rd to the 7th of November. Now, this week raises awareness about stress and the importance of mental health in the workplace. Legal experts say that employers who ignore signs of burnout could face serious consequences. Channel Africa's Lebohang Mabange has more.
According to the 2024 SANDC report, 52% of employees have been diagnosed with a mental health condition, while 38% fear losing their jobs due to these challenges. Employment law experts at Cleve Decker Hofmeyer warn that toxic workplace cultures marked by bullying, manipulation, and burnout are taking a serious toll on employee well-being and business performance. Chantal Daguvia is the associate in the employment law practice at CDA.
Where an employer recognizes that its employees are struggling with stress or burnout, it's very important for them to reasonably accommodate that employee or employees. And this can take shape in various forms. So it could be by alleviating some of the workload that an employee may have, or subjecting them to a medical examination where a medical practitioner assesses their mental health and is able to provide, medical advice on what to do to alleviate the pressure.
Taguvia says courts are now taking a firm stance against employers who fail to respond appropriately when employees show signs of poor mental health.
What we are noting is that the courts are taking a very firm approach in respect of employers who disregard clear signs of poor mental health and where an employer follows a misconduct route rather than incapacity. And what does this mean? It means that where you're noting one of your employees is perhaps performing poorly or absent from work, and you are aware that it's due to mental illness, they are not taking those steps to ensure that that employee is assisted or accommodated, but rather subject them to a disciplinary hearing. This can result in a constructive dismissal claim, discrimination claim, or even an unfair dismissal dispute.
She adds that being proactive can help companies prevent legal disputes and build supportive, inclusive workplaces.
Mental health challenges in the workplace require employers to balance sensitivity issues against operational needs. By adopting a proactive, informed approach, employers can also foster a supportive working environment whilst mitigating risks. And practically, you're looking at things such as training for your managers to recognize incapacity issues, exploring alternatives to accommodate disabled employees, and to also ensure that all of your policies are aligned to the latest legislation to ensure that they make provision for inclusivity and accommodation in the workplace.
Recent legislative changes now recognize mental impairments as a form of disability under the Employment Equity Act.
Whilst I do think there's still quite a lot of work to be done, we have seen a general shift in our legislatures and our court system. For instance, the Employment Equity Act and the revised Code of Good Practice have both been amended to recognize mental impairments to form part of the definition of disability. What this means under the Employment Equity Act is that those who suffer from long-term, recurring, Physical, mental, intellectual, or sensory impairments are now included under the definition of disability.
As the country marks International Stress Awareness Week, experts say protecting mental health at work is not just good practice, it's a legal and moral responsibility. Reporting for Channel Africa, I am Lebuchang Mabange in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Wake up to the essence of the continent. Rise and shine on Channel Africa.
New data from the second quarter of the 2025 Business Partners Limited SME Confidence Index shows a rise in optimism among South Africa's small and medium enterprises. More than half believe the newly established Madlanga Commission, a national inquiry into corruption and organized crime, could be a crucial step toward restoring integrity in the country's governance and business environment. While confidence is improving, many entrepreneurs say the government of national unity still needs to provide clearer policy direction and stronger support for small businesses. To discuss this, we are joined on the line by David Morobe, who is Executive General Manager for Impact Investing at Business Partners Limited. David, thank you for making time for us this morning. How are you today?
Well, thank you, and thank you for having me.
Our pleasure. What do these findings tell us about the current mood and resilience of South Africa's small and medium enterprise space?
Now, thank you very much. First, the why we do the confidence index is to gauge the buoyancy of our entrepreneurs in the SME sector, and also for them to understand the social and economic issues that are affecting our small and medium enterprises. So the quarter two survey indicated a very cautious optimism by our SMEs, and that was mostly around the Madlanga Commission, in that it may be a turning point against issues that have been affecting them, especially where there were aspects of crime and corruption that they have raised in several surveys that we have conducted with them. So they feel this is an opportunity for transparency. This is an opportunity for bringing about reform in issues that affect them. It had gone so bad that some of the small and medium enterprises, even owned by professionals, were being asked to pay protection fees for them to continue their operations. And I think what they are saying in this quarter two is that there are some positive steps that are taking place, and they believe that things will be sorted out.
The index showing that optimism then, despite political uncertainty, what do we attribute that to?
Well, perhaps the whole cliche that SME entrepreneurs are eternal optimists rings true in this particular instance, because notwithstanding all the challenges that we have in the country, they remain very positive. I think more than 66% of our SMEs were quite content and having a positive outlook about what will happen.
I think our line got cut there. David, are you still there? We'll try and get a hold of David again. We continue this conversation. He is Executive General Manager for Impact Investing at Business Partners Limited. Our lines got cut there, so let's figure out what's going on. We'll take a short break.
Listen in on Channel Africa.
Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Is he there?
Okay, it's 6:53. We're still trying to get hold of your guests. It's sad when we lose some of these important people.
Yeah.
So, guess what happened today in the United States, 2008, on this day? I mean, it was quite a thing.
2008, was it Michael Jackson? Something to do with him?
No, Barack Obama elected U.S. president. Senator Barack Obama of Illinois was elected the 44th president of the United States, becoming the first person of African-American descent to hold office. And it was massive.
Feels like it was just now.
Yeah, I remember Reverend Jesse Jackson crying. But anyway, I think
Yeah.
your guest is back.
Yes, we're back with David. David, thanks for your patience. I don't know what happened there. Our lines got cut, but we were still on that point on the index showing optimism despite political instability, and you were discussing the factors that have contributed to this confidence. Please continue there.
Yeah, no, I was saying the cliché about them being very optimistic people or entrepreneurs is probably what keeps them very confident in the prospects of their businesses growing in the next 12 months. There were some concerns that were raised about the disagreements that were experienced in the government of national unity, particularly around the lack of clarity in the processes of approving the budget earlier this year. That resulted in many of our SMEs making changes to their accounting system in anticipation of VAT increases, only to reverse those changes that they had made. So these are aspects that affected our SMEs, but notwithstanding that, they remain quite optimistic because of that very cliché I mentioned.
So it's one thing for confidence to improve, but does this directly correlate to small businesses receiving the stronger support that they need and an enabling environment for increased participation for entrepreneurs?
Yeah, look, they remain confident because everyone who starts a business has, kind of a confidence that their prospects or their businesses will be successful. But that doesn't mitigate the idea of receiving support. So issues that relate to cash flow, that relate to access to finance, and where possible also mentorship and technical assistance remain very important for our SMEs. And to the extent that the private sector and government have come to the party, that in a sense bolsters the confidence of our SMEs because a number of institutions are really improving in terms of the support that is being meted out to our small and medium enterprise entrepreneurs.
We speak of the case study of the Madlanga Commission, but as a general overview, how do corruption and organized crime directly affect SME involvement and growth, as well as investor confidence?
It adds a layer of costs for the SME which costs are not anticipated. I mentioned the issue of crime has been quite an issue that has been raised for the last, I would say, 5 years because it has been increasing. So when SMEs have to pay protection fees, when they have to add another layer of bribery to whoever is wanting some return from SMEs trading, it only makes the SME trading environment even far more difficult than what the case should be. So I think the sooner these syndicates are being dismantled, the better it is for our SMEs. Hence, their optimism about better prospects with the transparency that is being showcased and the reform that is, there's an expectation that Madlanga Commission probably would make things better.
Okay, as we speak of expectations, what would you like to see the government of national unity doing to support small business growth in a more effective way?
Well, it was good that I saw the leaders of the various parties had a meeting over the weekend and came up with a very positive statement that they are still intent on working together. What is important for small and medium enterprises is a very policy consistency. That's something that is highlighted by many SMEs in our surveys. They want public and private sectors to be invested in creating a supportive, predictable business environment where they can operate. So that way, our SMEs will realize that, or they want government to realize that they cannot alone solve the unemployment crisis. It requires collaborative effort between the private sector and government, and once that environment is available, we are likely to see less unemployment than we have seen, especially amongst our young people.
David, great catching up with you, and thanks for always making time for us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. David Morobe is Executive General Manager for Impact Investing at Business Partners Limited, unpacking the 2025 Business Partners Limited SME Confidence Index, which is showing a rise in optimism among South Africa's small and medium enterprises. Of course, we need to take that, make sure that it does correlate into more participation for these entrepreneurs in the space. So, It feels like it was just yesterday, that day in history that you were sharing with me now, 2008.
Obama.
And I realized that's as
Yeah.
old as my daughter, which is a long time, 17 years.
Sheesh. Yeah, no, it feels like a long time when you think about taking her to school every single day
Yeah.
and doing homework.
And I'm so glad I'm done with that. I'm done with that.
But when you start to think in terms of how many presidents have come into office since then, it's not a lot. Because after him was Donald Trump again for the first time. Then, what's his name? The old guy who had to pull out of the race?
Biden.
Oh, yes. How could I forget Joe Biden? And then Donald Trump again, and that's it.
Yeah.
It's only been 2 presidents since Barack.
Well, it is now 7 o'clock Central African time. We enter the second hour of Rise and Shine. At Channel Africa 1 is our handle. We'd love to hear your views. Get in touch with us there on social media with your questions and your comment. That's also where we live stream to you this Tuesday morning via YouTube. My name is Asanda Beda.
And I'm Peter Ndoro. Thanks for tuning in to the second hour of the program. We got quite a bit that we'll be looking at. 2 of the things, big interviews that we have in this hour. Nigeria have a new security threat, Lakurawa Group. Very little known, but increasingly becoming dangerous. We find out who they are and what risks that they pose for the security forces in Nigeria. And then in Mali, a fuel blockade that's been imposed by Al-Qaeda militants is causing havoc in that country as well. So we'll be unpacking these big security issues, Nigeria and Mali, amongst other stories. But that's all coming up after the news with Onele Nsinsi and your sports headlines with Rachel Makura.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Well, thank you, Peter. The military commander who has ruled Guinea since a coup 4 years ago has entered the presidential race. Colonel Mamadi Doumbouya has broken an earlier promise to hand power to a civilian government. Doumbouya submitted his candidacy at the Supreme Court yesterday, flanked by soldiers and wearing black sunglasses. He did not make any public comment. 2 of Guinea's biggest opposition parties, the RPG and the UFDG, have been excluded from the December contest. This has raised concern about the election credibility. People in Tanzania have been sharing images of bodies strewn on the streets after the violence that followed last week's election. Access to the internet was blocked until yesterday afternoon. This hours after Samia Suluhu Hassan was sworn in for her second term as president. She insists that the poll was free and fair, but the opposition has described it as a sham. A diplomatic source said there's credible evidence that about 500 people were killed. Famine has spread to 2 more regions in Sudan. They include the city of Al-Fashir in northern Darfur that the paramilitary rapid support forces captured last week. The other places that a UN-backed global hunger monitoring group has named is Kadulgi in southern Kordofan. The BBC's Richard Kago.
Ongoing fighting has cut off food and aid supplies to tens of thousands of people, deepening Sudan's humanitarian crisis. In its latest report, the second in less than a year, the UN-backed Hunger Monitoring Group warns that 20 other areas around El Fasher and Kadugli are also at risk of famine, with conditions likely to persist over the next 3 months. Aid agencies report an exodus of thousands of people, including women, children and the elderly, fleeing El Fasher following the RSF takeover. The report says nearly 500,000 people have already been pushed into famine since September.
South Africa's crime intelligence head, Dumisani Kumalo, will return to the Madlanga Commission of Inquiry in Pretoria this morning. He was unable to continue his testimony last month because he fell ill. Since then, various witnesses, including the Hawks Divisional Commissioner Patrick Mboto, have testified. Mboto denied allegations that Hawks members attempted to interfere in police operations to arrest businessman and murderer accused Katiso KT Molefe at his home in Sandhurst, Johannesburg in December last year. Sibahle Mota reports.
General Mboto testified that he did not know whose house the police operation was being conducted on when Molefe was arrested in December 2024. The Hawks have been accused of trying to interfere with police operations at Molefe's premises. However, Hawks members have defended their actions by alluding to a bogus police operation they believed was being conducted. However, questions have been raised why they remained outside the premises even though there was confirmation of a legitimate police operation taking place.
And lastly, U.S. President Donald Trump has played down the possibility of a U.S. war with Venezuela, but suggested President Nicolas Maduro's days as the country's president are numbered. Trump made the remarks on CBS TV after the U.S. military launched another strike on what it said was a drug smuggling boats in the Caribbean. It's conducted more than a dozen such attacks so far. The U.S. president has reiterated that Maduro won't be Venezuela's president for long, but appeared to deny that he is planning attacks inside Venezuela.
I would say, yeah, I think so, yeah. Don't tell you that. I mean, I'm not saying it's true or untrue, but, I wouldn't,
Why would
I
we
wouldn't
do
be
it?
inclined to say that I would do that. But because I don't talk to a reporter about whether or not I'm going to strike.
For any news stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us at +27 11 714 4459. Channel Africa News. I am Onele Nzinzi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
And coming up in your sports news this hour, South Africa off to a winning start in Qatar, and Novak Djokovic will play at the ATP Finals. Details coming up at 7:30.
Start your day informed, inspired, and entertained. Asanda and Peter bring you Rise and Shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time.
Nigeria's armed forces are stepping up operations against a little-known but fast-growing militant group in the country's northwest, the Lakurawa, once hired by rural leaders in Sokoto State to defend it against banditry. The group has morphed into an extremist movement with links to Islamic State, Sahel province. It now enforces its own version of Sharia, taxes locals, recruits youth, and carries out cross-border attacks into Niger and Benin. Well, to help us understand who the Lakurawa are and why they've proven so difficult to defeat, we're now joined from Abuja by Nigerian security analyst Chidi Omeje. Chidi, thanks very much indeed for joining us on the program.
Thank you for having me, and good morning from this end.
Tell us what you know about this group, the Lakurawa, and why they seem to be gaining some momentum.
The Lakurawa terror group, actually, these guys started off in Niger Republic in the 90s, early 90s, during the regime of the late Menasara. Menasara was the former president of Niger Republic. Now, the president then, in his wisdom, brought those guys to, guys together to train them, locals together to train them, to help in warding off cross-border bandits, especially those bandits from Mali. So now he got those guys, kept training them, but when he died eventually, through coup d'etat, these guys who are already formidable, they splintered. Some went to different places, but most of them, found their way into Nigeria. Don't forget that there's this, border issues about Nigeria and Niger Republic. So it's quite easy for Nigerians to move into Nigeria and vice versa. So these guys, surreptitiously moved into the country, into Nigeria, and found safe haven in most of the ungoverned spaces in those border areas. So over time, these guys began to simmer into begin to diffuse into communities in those areas, and surreptitiously began to co-opt the youths in those areas. Because don't forget that there's this cultural, linguistic, and proximity affinity between Nigerian and some parts of Nigeria and then the Niger Republic. They speak Hausa language. They have a lot of things in common, so it was easy for them to settle there. So over time, they began to have a foothold in some of those Nigerian communities. Now, at a point, they gained the trust of the local authorities. In fact, they used them to ward off some other banditry and all manner of things. And before you knew it, they had their own plans and they grew into a monster. So it was late in 2024 that the defense headquarters of Nigeria, now formally having we got information on a lot of what the activities, now declared them as a terror group. So it was just in 2024, last year, that they were formally designated as a terror group, as one of the terror groups assailing the country. Now, the Lakarowa group, like we've seen, they began to develop affinity and links to terror networks. It was even assumed or believed that they had to do with the ISIS. So now this is just one terror group among others, that actually are selling the country. So the Lakarowa groups, it's not that they're very interactive, but the problem has always been the fact that they have a way of mixing with the locals, such that even if most times when you strike them, probably if Nigerian authorities have always had the problem of, how to actually deal with the situation, because you don't know who you're dealing with. These guys have already diffused into the communities, and it was difficult to now probably do a carpet bombing or whatever without collateral damages. So these are the issues. These are what most people think, that they're intractable. It's not that formidable, but the issue of identity is the problem, especially. That's my initial reaction.
Okay, so we know their origins, but what keeps them going now? What is their primary reason for being? Is it ideological? Is it a jihadist agenda? Or maybe just opportunistic economics? Or what's driving them now?
Yeah, as time is going on, as we move on now, you see, all the factors you listed are beginning to have an intermix, because, like I told you originally, these guys were essentially, when they started off, it was not an ideological thing, but don't forget that the jihadist, principle is what runs in the veins of these bandits and terrorists in the northern Nigeria, because almost all of them always have that allegiance to Islamic stuff. So now what is driving them currently is a combination of all the factors. They have that at the back of their mind, that they are jihadists. They, of course, they're economic plunderers, because of course they have to once in a while kidnap people, and they get ransom to fund, probably to fortify themselves, and they have that that tendency to have a foothold, seeing that the entire Sahel, the geopolitics in the Sahel have become such a turmoil, and that such that they can have a grind, in Nigeria or in Niger Republic or elsewhere, they can get foothold. So currently, there is an intermix of these factors you mentioned, and that's exactly what is making it difficult for the authorities to have an easy reign on them, because anything that is religious or ideological is in the mind. It's very difficult to deal with. And so, like I said, it's a combination of, for most, if as we speak currently, apart from these Lakarua guys, or most of these other terror and bandit groups, have this intermix of issues that sustain them. Some they have the religious, issues where they have such allegiance, and it helps them to sustain themselves. And of course, the fact that they're economic plunderers, they're engaged in all manner of things, kidnapping, cattle rustling, and every other thing that could get them, resources to fund their terror activities. So these are the issues.
Chidi, we're going to have to leave it there, but thank you very much indeed for sharing your thoughts with us on this growing group. And I think this is a story we certainly need to be paying attention to. But thank you for your insights today.
Appreciate the opportunity. Thanks.
That's a Nigerian security analyst, Chidi Omeje, giving us his thoughts on this new group called the Lakurawa. And they seem to be operating mostly in the rural areas, particularly along the border with Niger. And their ability to absorb themselves in local communities is making it difficult for the local authorities to deal with this insurgency.
Got something to say? Are you passionate about issues that matter? Do you have a voice that deserves to be heard? Well, we've got the perfect platform for you. Call in or drop us a WhatsApp on +27 63 406 9126 and we will call you back so you could have your say and be part of the conversation.
30 years of age. I just turned 30 on the 15th of November. So that's who I am,
It's not just talk. It's your chance to air your views, share your opinion, engage with a community that values your perspective. Follow us on our social media. Visit our website at www.channelafrica.co.za and get ready to share your views on Channel Africa, the African perspective. Stay tuned to Channel Africa. Stream us on our new and updated website, channelafrica.co.za. Your morning companion with the stories that matter. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
15 minutes past 7 Central African time it is. If you've just joined us, good morning. We go to Mali now here on Rise and Shine, where tensions are rising in that country. There's a 2-month-long fuel blockade imposed by Al-Qaeda-linked militants, and this has brought much of the capital, Bamako, to a standstill. Schools have closed, businesses are struggling, and diesel-powered electricity is in short supply. The group behind the blockade, Jama'at Nusrat al-Islam wal Muslimin, or JNIM, has been operating outside the city. While analysts say it lacks the capacity to seize Bamako outright, its strategy of economic disruption is putting unprecedented pressure on the military government, raising fears of political instability and potential regional spillover across the Sahel. Today, we're joined by Dr. Folahanmi Aina, a security analyst and lecturer in political economy of violence, conflict and development at SOAS University of London, to help us understand what this crisis means for Mali and the wider region. Doctor, good morning and thank you for making time for us today.
Thank you. Good morning.
JNIM has been blockading fuel supply in Bamako for 2 months now. What does this tell us about their strategy, their objectives, and the kind of power they yield?
Thank you very much once again. So Janin is an Al-Qaeda affiliated terrorist organization. It's the largest and the most formidable terrorist organization currently in Africa and the wider Sahel region. They've got about 6,000 to 7,000 fighters. They also use a very sophisticated weaponry and tactics during their operations, some of which includes the use of drones and also IEDs, improvised explosive devices. So they, to a large extent, yield significant strength. And their strategy with economic warfare, as we've seen in Mali, is mostly intended at crippling the economy on the one hand, and also on the other hand, trying to force the hand of the government. Because they've placed 2 demands. The first demand is to have their captured fighters or arrested fighters released. And then secondly, they are trying to impose a version of Sharia law, that says, amongst other things, women in public should be covered with veils. So they are mostly trying to, as I already mentioned, force the military junta in Mali to cave into their demands, whereas the military junta on the other hand, are not willing to do this because by doing this, it would serve as some form of way of demonstrating to Jenin that Jenin could use this as an opportunity against the military in the future. So it's more or less like a stalemate, if you would, yes.
Colonel Assimi Goita's military junta has faced internal tensions, including arrests of high-ranking officers. How vulnerable is the government to this kind of pressure?
Yes, so yes, the government in Mali has indeed experienced some form of pressures, as you can expect with most military juntas. There's always, this prospect of some officers always trying to maybe perhaps change the government through some form of military coup or internal coups. Yes, these are things that are pretty common within military juntas. But Goita's ability to hold on to power remains to be seen, even though he's tried so much to consolidate his grip on power and also postpone the transition to democratic rule, which is an indication in the first instance that he's trying to perpetuate himself continually in power. But as for whether or not there could be a potentially successful counter coup, would remain to be seen as long as he continues to consolidate his hold on power and his troops. He might pretty much continue to build himself, as the head of state in Mali.
What are the chances of that triggering of another coup? As you say, it does remain to be seen, but how high are the stakes here? Some analysts have warned against that. They also say that Jenim does not yield enough capacity to completely capture Bamako, but they do have, or they have exerted pressure economically and psychologically on the military.
Yes, so Jenin does have significant capabilities, as I already mentioned. And yes, to some extent, they, in some communities where they yield influence through their influence operations, they may have some sympathizers. Whether or not they have sympathizers amongst the military is something I'm not completely sure of or aware of. But on the other hand, their ability to completely topple Bamako or overrun the entire state is not something they want right now. It's not something Jenin has expressed interest in. Like I already mentioned, their concern right now is to have their captured fighters released and also to institute some form of Sharia law, but also to mention that because they are trying as much as possible to expand their revenue sources, the particular region where they have sieged, where they've launched this economic siege, which is the Kayes region, it's significant to note that that particular region has constitutes about 70% of Mali's gold production. So in many ways, amongst other things, it seems, it appears to be that Jenin has its eyes, on gold in Mali as a potential source of revenue, given as we've already seen that they started this economic sabotage about a month ago. And if you also notice, about a month ago, we've seen an increase, in the price of gold, even though it has also just started dropping again. So again, my understanding or my suspicion would be that Jenin is pretty much trying to expand its revenue sources and not necessarily interested in overrunning or overtaking the Malian state.
And Mali doesn't operate as an island. It is part of an alliance of Sahel regions with Niger and Burkina Faso. So what are the neighboring countries, especially those in this alliance, able to do to tackle this issue of Jenim, and do they have capacity?
Yes, so unfortunately, since the AES, the Alliance of Sahelian States, pulled out of ECOWAS, they have mostly pitched tents with the Eastern Bloc. And this has particularly been with countries such as Russia, Turkey, China, to essentially try to boost their military capabilities and also shore up their economic base. But unfortunately, their ability as a group to be able to tackle and address the mounting insecurity in the region is not looking promising. Primarily because even though they have try to constitute an operational force, a joint operational force. This force will mostly lack the equipment, the resources, the training to be able to address such a formidable such a formidable group as Jenin. Let's also be reminded that beyond Jenin, there are also other existing terrorist organizations within the region, some of which are ISIS affiliated. So it's not just Jenin that's the problem, but there are also many others. And even though also that the use of military tactics, even as an approach to solving insecurity, has had the unintended consequence of contributing towards the protractedness of these conflicts, rather than actually addressing the underlying root causes, that necessitate these conflicts in the first instance, such as socioeconomic issues, poverty, inequality, unemployment, and all of that. So the military aren't necessarily trained to address these issues. Rather, their focus would be more on yielding the big guns, which, as I already mentioned, has the unintended consequence of prolonging the conflict, unfortunately.
Dr. Aina, we're going to leave it there for today, but thank you again for your time and valuable insights.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Dr. Folahanmi Aina, security analyst and lecturer in political economy of violence, conflict and development at SOAS University of London, talking to us about the situation in Mali there, where a 2-month-long fuel blockade has been imposed by Al-Qaeda-linked militants and how that has brought much of the capital, Bamako, to a standstill.
From Cape to Cairo, Dakar to Dar es Salaam, rise and shine with Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda on Channel Africa.
The president of the Pan-African Parliament, Chief Fortune Charumbira, has voiced concern over developments in Tanzania following last Wednesday's disputed elections. Speaking at the opening of the 6th ordinary session of the 6th Pan-African Parliament in Johannesburg, he urged member states to uphold democratic values and transparency. The 2-week session is being held under the African Union's theme of the year, which is Justice for Africans and People of African Descent through Reparations. Nhlanhla Mahlangu has more.
Tanzanian President Samia Suluhu Hassan has been sworn in for a second term amid tight security following an election marred by violent protests and rejected by the opposition as a sham. In his welcoming remarks, President of the Pan-African Parliament Chief Fortune Charumbira says Tanzania is known as a peaceful country and deadly protests that followed after the elections are concerning.
Elections in Tanzania, we haven't heard the full report from those that attended or participated, observed elections. We don't have yet a full report, even half report we don't have. But from the media, it shows that we have problems. And if you saw some videos, you see the youth population being very active, even in Tanzania. And the way I know Tanzanians, to me, Tanzania will be the last country on this continent to go to the streets the way they did this time. Tanzanians are very obedient, very disciplined, very, very disciplined. And now to see Tanzanians behave like that, we get scared. What of other countries? This thing may go out of hand on this continent. And Pan-African Parliament is our duty to think through these issues. As PAP, if we are to be of any value, to advise our member states, to advise heads of state, and not try to predict what the future could be like and what could be done.
The CEO of the African Peer Review Mechanism, Ambassador Marie-Antoinette Rose Quatre, says the continent continues to grapple with critical issues that threaten democratic stability, sustainable development, effective and good governance.
Among these issues is integrity of democratic elections, diversity management, and human rights abuses, as well as corruption. While we welcome free, fair, and transparent elections in most of our member states, as well as peaceful transfer of power in some of our member states, we are also concerned by election-related violence in some of our member states that have been categorized by loss of life, injuries, and destruction of property and public infrastructure. We call on our governments and all stakeholders to guarantee integrity of elections so that people can vote freely and fairly, and the outcome becomes a true expression of their will. Integrity of elections is one of the triggers of unconstitutional changes of government. Therefore, it is imperative that we give it priority.
The president of the Global Council for Tolerance and Peace, Ahmed Mohamed Al-Jawan, delivered the keynote address, pledging his support for PEP.
We would like to emphasize our support for all that provides peace and stability in Africa. We would like to emphasize that Africa is not looking for only for peace, but also creates peace. And it's not waiting for a future, but it builds a future. We, in the International Council for Peace and Tolerance, which brings together more than 100 parliaments, we are proud of this PAB, which represents a pivotal corner in our parliament system.
The PEP comprises 275 members drawn from all African Union member states and serves as a platform for legislators to deliberate on key continental issues and contribute to policy and decision-making aimed at advancing Africa's development. The current session will run until Friday, the 14th of November, with committee activities and statutory engagements, amongst others. Reporting for Channel Africa, I am Ndlandla Mahlangu in Johannesburg.
Listen in on Channel Africa.
Channel Africa, the African perspective.
It's 7:30 Central African Time. Let's get our news headlines. Here's Onele Nzinzi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. The International Criminal Court prosecutors say they are collecting evidence of alleged mass killings and rapes after the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces seized Al Fashir, the last stronghold of the military in Sudan's Darfur region. The ICC has been investigating alleged genocide, war crimes and crimes against humanity committed in Darfur since 2005. Famine has spread to two more regions in Sudan. They include the city of Al Fashir in northern Darfur that the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces captured last week. And U.S. President Donald Trump has played down the possibility of a U.S. war with Venezuela, but suggested President Nicolas Maduro's days as the country's president are numbered. Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Nzinzi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African perspective.
Oh, I'm getting carried away here. It's time for sports. Good morning, Rachel Musibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thank you so much, Peter. Very good morning from the sports desk. So taking a look at the CAF Confederation Cup draw that took place yesterday right here in Johannesburg. There will be an Egyptian derby in the group stages of the Total Energies CAF Confederation Cup. This after Zamalek as well as Al Masry were paired together in the group that took place, the draw rather, should I say, that took place yesterday in Johannesburg. So Group A has USM Alger of Algeria, and there's also Jabolia AC de Bamako of Mali, Olympic Club de Safi of Morocco, FC San Pedro of Cote d'Ivoire. Group B comprises of Wydad Casablanca of Morocco, AS Manema of the Democratic Republic of Congo, Azam FC of Tanzania, as well as Nairobi United, should I say, of Kenya. Group C, CR Belouizdad of Algeria, Stellenbosch FC from South Africa, AS Otono of Congo, as well as Singida Black Stars of Tanzania. Group D sees Zamalek of Egypt, Al Masry of Egypt, Kaizer Chiefs of South Africa, as well as Zesco United, who will all be battling out for a place in the knockout stages of this year's tournament. Well, South Africa claimed its first win at a FIFA Under-17 World Cup, this beating Bolivia 3-1 in Qatar on the tournament's opening day on Monday. Emil Witbooi, Neo Botoko, as well as Sean Els, each netted for Amajimbos despite an early red card to Sive Palmer. Now, the head coach Vela Kumalo's Chargers showed grit as well as determination to power past the South American nation on the tournament's opening day despite playing with 10 men on the park from the 36th minute. Now, both goalkeepers were kept busy during the first half, with Bolivia taking 11 shots at South Africa's goal in the first period, while Bolivia faced 6 shots from South Africa. With one in the bag, Amajimbos will now face the host side Qatar in the second game of this year's tournament on Thursday. Well, Novak Djokovic has confirmed his participation at the ATP Finals in Turin, Italy, with the Italian Tennis Federation President Angelo Bangai confirming the news, easing concerns that the 24-time Grand Slam champion may pull out of the season finale. Now, the world number 5 Djokovic, who withdrew from the season ender just last year due to an injury, skipped the Paris Masters and has not played since losing to qualifier Valentin Bacharot in the Shanghai Masters semi-finals last month. The November 9 to 16 ATP Finals will feature the world's top 8 players, with Djokovic having won the tournament a record 7 times and lifting the trophy back in 2023. Elina Rybakina, meanwhile, stand eager Swiatek to confirm her place in the knockout stages of the WTA finals, while Amanda Anisimova produced a comeback victory to stay in contention in Riyadh yesterday. So the former Wimbledon champion Rybakina was outplayed in the opening set against the world number 2 Swiatek, but completely dominated thereafter. 6-seed Rybakina won 12 of the final 13 games to storm to a 3-6, 6-1, 6-love win and snap a 4-match losing streak against Swiatek. Now, the American Anisimova later beat compatriot Madison Keys to send Rybakina through to the semi-finals. Anisimova battled back from a set down to beat Keys 4-6, 6-3 and 6-2 and set up a winner-takes-all final group match against Poland's Iga Swiatek on Wednesday.
Yeah, it's always very tough to play against Iga. She brings so much intensity on the court, and I feel like she started really well the match, and I was a little bit slow. So the serve straight away, she broke me, so it was difficult to be down. But in the second set, I pushed myself, the serve improved, and really happy that I stepped in and played better each point. So very happy with the performance, and thank you so much for support.
All right, so that concludes the Sports News this hour. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, our email address is newsroom@channelafrica.co.za. Give us a call as well on +27 11714 4459. For Channel Africa Sport, I am Musibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Parlez-vous couramment le français? Êtes-vous passionné par la radio? Et êtes-vous qualifié pour travailler en Afrique du Sud? Envoyez-nous votre CV et vos 3 minutes démo en MP3 à @channelafrica.co.za pour avoir une chance de rejoindre la famille Channel Africa. Si vous n'avez pas de réponse après 14 jours, cela signifie que vous n'avez pas été retenu. Channel Africa, la perspective africaine.
Let's check in with the world of business as we say good morning to Chanduko Lekeke.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Good morning. Head of Programs at the Institute for Social Accountability, TISA Kenya, Alexandra Riti, says the mutual agreement between the Kenyan government and the International Monetary Fund to not proceed with the 9th and final review of a $3.6 billion program has affected the government's purse negatively. Riti says the Kenyan government now relies on heavy domestic borrowing, which means it now competes with the private sector for limited resources within the economy. Currently, talks between Kenya and the IMF for a new funding program have been delayed with no clear timelines or indication of a way forward. Riti says at the moment the private sector is not showing signs of growth.
We are losing jobs, and therefore the economy is on a slowdown. The hope is that if we were to get into this program, then there will be a reduction in the level of government operations in the private space, which would then leave enough resources for private sector to grow, therefore increasing the available jobs for ordinary Kenyans.
FlySafair says it does not anticipate any disruption to its flight schedule despite the cabin's crew strike. The action started this morning. The striking workers, the South African Cabin Crew Association represents, are now demanding higher wages and the revision of the roster. FlySafair says more than two-thirds of its cabin crew have committed to continue working. This comprises of non-union members and union members who have formally accepted the company's 5.7% wage increase offer. In other news, the National Union of Mine Workers and Eskom have started wage negotiations. The power utility is offering a 15% wage increase. The union's demand include $404 a month housing benefit and the company's medical aid contribution of 80%. The current percent multi-year agreement will end in June next year. The union's national spokesperson is Ribuwani Mamburu.
A figure justified by high costs of living. We stand in solidarity with other unions that are organizing at Eskom in demanding that negotiations remain within the Central Bargaining Forum. Eskom and government must understand that the unbundling of Eskom must not be used to unbundle workers' unity and collective bargaining rights, as members prefer to negotiate in the Central Bargaining Forum.
A strike by Tunisian bank workers demanding pay rises has halted all financial transactions as the country struggles with an economic crisis. Lines formed at the cash points as the walkout started yesterday, but customers said many of the machines were broken. Locals are struggling to get access of basic commodities such as medicines, while some goods are short in supply. The UGTT union called the strike after talks over pay and working conditions broke down with the Banking Council, which represents all public and private banks. The union says rising living costs have eroded employees' purchasing power and is demanding urgent adjustments to salaries. The White House says it will use emergency funds to provide food aid to more than 40 million Americans. This is in the midst of no end in sight to the government shutdown. Low-income families will now receive at least half the money they usually get. The Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program costs about $8 billion or nearly 140 Rand a month. Monique Lewis, who lives in New York, is one of the recipients.
I think things will be like a little tight, but I mean, I don't think we'll like go hungry, but when I think about other people, like, elders and people disabled, seniors who are not working, just on fixed incomes, I think it's like really disturbing, that this is happening to them, and particularly around the holiday season.
$1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,436 naira. In Botswana, 13 pula 70. Kenya, the dollar is 128 shilling 20. Zambia, 22 kwacha 8. The BRICS countries, $1 in Brazil is at 5.38. In Russia, 79 rubles 55. India, 80 rupee 80. China, 71.12. South Africa, 17 rand 31 cents. $1 is 76 pence to the British pound, 87 to the euro. Commodities, gold is at $3,982, platinum at $1,560 per ounce. The price of Brent crude oil at $64.69 a barrel. That's all for now. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za, or you can call us on +27 11 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I am Chanduko Ligege.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Africa Update on Channel Africa with Lulu Kabu.
Mozambique's opposition leader Venancio Mondlane has been charged with incitement to terrorism and disobedience. He faces a total of 5 charges. The charges relate to post-election violence that left hundreds of people dead. What punishment is he looking at?
The most severe charges are 2. One is incitement for terrorism, and also is being charged for mobilizing people for terrorism. terrorism during the protests. These charges are really serious and severe. If he is condemned, is found guilty, he could serve 10 years plus years in jail, meaning that he would be banned from political participation, mainly for the 2028 and 2029 electoral cycle.
The director of CDD, the Center for Democracy and Development, Adriano Novunga.
Africa Update with Lulu Kabu, 12 to 1 p.m. Central African Time. Be inspired. Stay informed. Channel Africa, the beauty of life. Now available anytime, anywhere with our new app.
Channel Africa.
Your Africa, your voice, your channel. Channel Africa.
The African perspective.
Now, in South Africa's largest city, Johannesburg, a major court ruling has put the spotlight on how local authorities deal with informal traders, the street vendors who form the backbone of many African economies. Now, the High Court has ordered that the city of Johannesburg to speed up the registration and verification of traders who sell goods on the city's pavements, after the municipality forcibly removed many of them, accusing them of operating without permits or in unauthorized zones. The court ruled that the city must now run an open process between the 4th and the 18th of November to register all qualifying traders. The case was brought by the Socio-Economic Rights Institute of South Africa, or SERI, which argued that the removals were unlawful and violated people's rights to earn a living. To unpack this further, we're now joined by Deborah Rabuda, who's an attorney at SERI and lead counsel on this particular case. Deborah, thanks very much indeed for joining us and welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
So perhaps you can tell us what exactly happened that led to the city removing hundreds of informal traders from the streets.
I wish I knew. I think when the informal traders approached us, they told us that on the morning of 2 October, they were told that they could no longer trade in places that had been trading for over 30 years. So they weren't given any prior notice and they weren't given any timelines or what the development plans are. So we had no choice but to approach the court on their behalf.
Aren't there bylaws that exist and that maybe that these traders were not abiding by?
The traders were trading in demarcated places, but nonetheless, if there are bylaws, once again, you need to give people notice, and if they are in violation of a bylaw, you have to give them that notice.
How has the city responded to the High Court decision about accelerating the process of issuing permits?
The city has already communicated to us where informal traders can come for the verification process starting today.
All right. So, I mean, this deadline between the 4th and the 18th of November is quite short notice. How realistic is it that all eligible traders actually can be verified and registered in that time?
I mean, I think the city would have to account for that, but they did say they are capable of carrying out an expedited verification process. And so we are hoping that it is indeed possible as well.
Is it possible that some of these traders actually are not properly documented, shouldn't be trading, and won't be given permits?
That's why I think the verification process is important to just iron out who can and cannot trade and who qualifies in terms of having the right documentation. And that is something that our clients have no problem with presenting themselves for the verification process.
So many traders feel that the city's enforcement has been pretty heavy-handed. I guess the question might be, how do you balance things like the need for order and cleanliness with the people's rights to earn a living?
I think it happens with good management of the informal trading spaces. And once again, like I said, the informal traders that we act on behalf of were always willing to comply with the city's processes and development plans. It's just unfortunate that it had to happen as essentially forceful removal, which means that for the past several weeks they haven't been able to earn a living. Whereas we are of the view that this could have been done in a manner that there would be meaningful consultations between the two timelines and so forth.
Is the city doing anything to support those traders who've lost income as a result of their removal, especially given the High Court decision?
Not that I know of. I think what the city has offered is an expedited process, and I think they had said that if somebody is found to be eligible and they've been verified and so forth, they would offer them allocations as part of the verification process. So we are grateful for that expedited process that the city is offering.
Is this case precedent setting in a way? What does this do for traders generally?
I think the precedent that's it's setting is essentially that meaningful consultation is a way to resolve issues. I think because it's going to mediation now, and it is something that the informal traders do welcome because they always had wanted to engage with the city in a meaningful manner, sorry. And I also think this is an opportunity for informal traders and the city to work hand in hand because at the end of the day, they are trading in the city of Johannesburg and they can't be able to help it. So we don't want necessarily hostilities and bad blood. We just want to find a way to be able to be part of the city and engage with the city and be lawful in terms of the informal trader bylaws. So I think this is also an opportunity to just do things the right way and be able to essentially work hand in hand with the city.
All right. And then finally, what's next after getting this ruling?
What's next is the verification process will proceed, and then the city and the informal traders will engage in the mediation process to just hash out issues that the city and the informal traders couldn't find each other during the court proceedings.
Thanks very much indeed. And that
Thank
was
you very much.
Deborah Rabuda, an attorney with the Socio-Economic Rights Institute of South Africa, explaining the significance of the recent court ruling on informal trading in Johannesburg.
Every voice matters. Every moment counts. Celebrate life with Channel Africa. The African perspective. Now in your pocket. Keep Africa in your hands. Connect to our website for all your news, sports, and cultural updates. channelafrica.co.za.
All right, let's take a look at our next guest now. We've just heard there from lawyers representing the informal traders. Let's get a response from the city of Johannesburg itself, which has been ordered by the court to fast-track the process of verifying and registering street vendors in Johannesburg, often seen as South Africa's economic hub. And the city says that its actions were aimed at maintaining order and that all traders operate legally. Joining us now is Ntatisi Modingwane, who's the Deputy Director for Communications for the City of Johannesburg. Thanks very much indeed for joining us and welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Peter, and thank you for the opportunity, and good morning to your audience as well.
All right, so your reaction to the High Court ruling?
Now, from the city side, we welcome the ruling because the ruling came as a form of some settlement between the city and SERI, where we had to agree on some of the processes. Because one of the things that was the challenge, Peter, is that because of opportunistic tendencies, especially where there is no regulations, some people were reluctant to come forward and do the verification. So we're saying this court opens the discussions between us and the trader so that they can come, and then we do the verification quickly, and then we are able to allocate properly and make sure that the streets are orderly and maintained well.
Do you think you'll be able to get this verification process done in time? It seems quite short notice, actually.
Yes, it is a tight deadline. However, we have put all the resources that we would require. Currently, I'm now at the venue. We're going to be starting at 9 and finishing at 4 daily from today until the 18th. So we are urging people to come and really and not wait for the last minutes. Wanting to force us to extend, because this is a court order and the court is expecting feedback after the 18th.
So the lawyers were telling us that one of the things that you failed to do was to give fair notice. Do you put your hand up on that?
We engaged with informal settlement, informal traders way in advance. Maybe they are correct to say maybe written notices were not given. However, the MMC for Economic Development, the executive mayor, August, talking to informal traders, explaining the issues of bylaws and as well as the MMC for development planning. And then the issue was that, guys, let's organize ourselves because we are strengthening bylaw enforcement so that we are in compliance with the bylaw.
Is this an issue right across the city? I mean, one sees it a lot in the center of Johannesburg, but are we seeing this informal trading and the rules that need to be applied playing out in other parts of the city? And is this something that you're watching?
Yes, we do have certain pockets of the city that experiences the same challenges. We do have other CBDs like Yolenesia. We do have challenges in the precinct of the Jabulani Mall in Soweto. We do have some challenges in the Region A section. So we're saying this ruling paves the way for the entire city to be able, will take the model that we're going to be applying here and replicate it across the entire region, the 7 regions of the city, so that we do not have situations where the next time bylaw enforcement operations happens in Randburg, there is an outcry again to say there is mass eviction of informal traders.
If they miss this window, what happens next? I mean, some people, they really rely on this trading to survive. If they miss this window for verification, registration, what happens?
For us, we need to go and give feedback to the courts to say how far are we, and maybe plead with the courts to say there is a backlog, and we would request an extension. If the courts grants us that, then we will be able to cover everyone. However, with the resources that we've put, we want to make sure that we meet the deadline that has been set by the court, so that we cover everyone, so that they do not lose out on opportunities to trade.
I'm guessing that enforcement must be a difficult thing for you, because the nature of the work that they do, they can pack up and move on to another location quite quickly. How are you going to manage this?
Yes, what we've done in terms of the allocation of personnel, we've increased the number of metropolis that are on the ground to ensure that there's constant visibility in those areas, so that we deal with issues of illegality quickly. Yes, there are challenges at times where people come and set up, and then once the police come and then they pack and go. But it's something that we are looking into in terms of, because we need, in terms of our policy, we need to set up what we call an informal traders committee that will also involve the informal trading sector, so that they work with us. We do not have to be having police in every corner. We need to work with them so that we deal with issues of illegality, so that we don't face these challenges in the future.
All right, so you welcome the decision and you think that it's going to work for both the traders and the city of Johannesburg. I guess a lot of the people on the ground will say these laws have to take into consideration that we're suffering, we're struggling. How do you balance
Yes.
the bylaws and also the desperation of the people on the ground?
Yes, it's a very tough balance, Peter. From our side, some few years ago, there was another damning ruling against the city on issues of informal trading. And the city was given clear guidelines by the courts in terms of what needs to be done. And that work has been done in terms of consulting the traders in terms of developing the policy itself, reviewing the bylaws, the previous bylaws, which the court had found that there are gaps that do not answer to some of the needs of the informal traders. So we have done the groundwork in terms of making sure that it's open, transparent, and consultative. So we just have to find a way of assisting traders to also transition to some form of formal trading as we work with them. So for us, we're saying people cannot be from hand to mouth forever. Government needs to come in and help. Come up with programs that will help people to transition quicker from the informality to a semi-formal arrangement.
Tatisi, we're going to have to leave it there, but thank you so much indeed for giving us some insight onto the city's view on these issues.
Thank you very much for the opportunity, Peter.
That was Ntatisi Mudingwane, who's the Deputy Director of Communications at the City of Johannesburg.
It's now 8 o'clock, time for the third and final hour of Rise and Shine. Good morning. If you're tuning in, we are Channel Africa and broadcasting live from our Johannesburg studios in South Africa. My name is Asanda Beda.
And I'm Peter Ndoro. Yes, indeed, the third and final hour of the program. And don't forget, www.channelafrica.co.za is where you can find us. And also on our mobile app, just go into your app store and look for SABC Plus and then Channel Africa, and then you can take us wherever you want, wherever you go. You can take us along with you. What's coming up this half an hour?
We take a look at Tanzania again, as we said, as we were covering our stories last week as well as earlier this week. Well, yesterday, it's only Tuesday. This is one that's going to be continuing in terms of coverage. So we'll speak to an analyst there looking at the politics after the president was inaugurated yesterday, but also how the economy is affected. We'll have a second guest on that one. So that's what's coming up, of course, and more stories. Let's get our news. Here's Onele Nzinzi first, and then following her is Musibudi Makura with sports headlines.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Well, thank you, Asanda. The International Criminal Court prosecutors say they are collecting evidence of alleged mass killings and rapes after the paramilitary rapid support forces seized Al-Fashir, the last stronghold of the military in Sudan's Darfur region. The ICC has been investigating alleged genocide, war crimes and crimes against humanity committed in Darfur since 2005, when the case was first referred by the UN Security Council, long before the current civil war erupted in 2023. Tato Letsaba reports.
More than 70,000 people have fled Al-Fasir so far. Experts have said the reported violence bears the hallmarks of previous episodes in Darfur that were wildly labeled as genocide. Last month, the ICC, based in The Hague, convicted the first Janjaweed militia leader to have been put on trial for atrocities committed in Darfur more than 20 years ago. With the ongoing investigation, the office is taking immediate steps regarding the alleged crimes in Al-Fasir to preserve and collect relevant evidence for its use in the future for prosecutions.
The military commander who has ruled Guinea since a coup 4 years ago has entered the presidential race. Colonel Mamadi Doumbouya has broken an earlier promise to hand power to a civilian government. Doumbouya submitted his candidacy at the Supreme Court yesterday, flanked by soldiers and wearing black sunglasses. He did not make any public comments. Two of Guinea's biggest opposition parties have been excluded from the December contest. This has raised concern about the election's credibility. Famine is spread to 2 more regions in Sudan. These include the city of Al-Fashir in northern Darfur that the paramilitary rapid support forces captured last week. The other place that a UN-backed global hunger monitoring group has named is Kadugi in southern Kordofan. The BBC's Richard Kago.
Ongoing fighting has cut off food and aid supplies to tens of thousands of people, deepening Sudan's humanitarian crisis. In its latest report, the second in less than a year, the UN-backed Hunger Monitoring Group warns that 20 other areas around El Fasher and Kadugli are also at risk of famine, with conditions likely to persist over the next 3 months. Aid agencies report an exodus of thousands of people, including women, children and the elderly, fleeing El Fasher following the RSF takeover. The report says nearly 500,000 people have already been pushed into famine since September.
South Africa's Crimes Intelligence Head, Dumisani Khumalo, will return to the Madlanga Commission of Inquiry in Pretoria this morning. He was unable to continue his testimony last month because he fell ill. Since then, various witnesses, including the Hawks Divisional Commissioner Patrick Mboto, have testified. Mboto denied allegations that Hawks members attempted to interfere in police operations to arrest businessman and murder-accused Katiso KT Molefe at his home in Sandhurst in Johannesburg in December last year. Sibahle Mota reports.
General Mboto testified that he did not know whose house the police operation was being conducted on when Molefe was arrested in December 2024. The Hawks have been accused of trying to interfere with police operations at Molefe's premises. However, Hawks members have defended their actions by alluding to a bogus police operation they believed was being conducted. However, questions have been raised why they remained outside the premises even though there was confirmation of a legitimate police operation taking place.
Lastly, the U.S. President Donald Trump has stepped up his campaign against Zoran Mamdani, the Democrat, who is favorite to win today's election to be mayor of New York City. In a social media post, Trump says he would be unlikely to contribute more than the legal minimum of federal funds to New York if Mamdani wins. But speaking at his final campaign rally, Mamdani hit back at Trump.
Everything that comes out of Donald Trump's mouth as if it is already legal just by virtue of who is saying it. And it is time to finally stand up to the bullies that make these threats, not to become the bullies ourselves. And we've seen time and time again that the best way to respond to Donald Trump and to defeat these kinds of threats is to actually stand up and fight back.
Channel Africa News, I am Onele Tsinzi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
And coming up in your sports news, Sawa Osman Dembele is fit and available for the Paris Saint-Germain Champions League showdown against Bayern Munich, while Novak Djokovic will play at the ATP Finals next month. Details coming up at the bottom of the hour.
Your morning companion with the stories that matter. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
At 8 on Rise and Shine, we head to Tanzania now as we through forward to this and we get more analysis, more updates coming from the country as well as neighboring countries and the international community as far as we can. Tanzania's incumbent President Samia Suluhu Hassan has been sworn in for his second term despite a disputed election last week. The formal event was held at a military base in the capital, Dodoma, and it comes after claims of the deaths of hundreds of opposition supporters in protests that swept Tanzania after the vote. Now for analysis, we're joined by East Africa political analyst Charles Areba. Charles, good morning. Always great catching up with you. How are you on this particular Tuesday?
Yes, morning to you.
So what is your take on developments in Kenya about Tanzania's elections? I think Kenyans have been quite vocal, especially on social media, as well as offering their support. And is there a sense of solidarity from Kenya with Tanzanians?
In fact, as from Kenya, we do analyze it, political analyst in Tanzania. The Tanzanian people, compared to our state of unrest in Kenya, is a bit low. Tanzanian people have not yet received democratic and freedom. If you compare the Tanzanian people and Kenya, you realize that Kenya is a far away much in terms of freedom and democratic. So when you see democracy in Tanzania, it was to be realized at the times of Magufuli. If Magufuli was to learn about 2 terms, he was now to transform Tanzania to a democratic country. Now, Tanzanian people, the leadership in Tanzania is bestowed to those people who has power. So that's why Samia Suluhu has overtaken the events of unrest and now is being declared a winner, and they run Tanzania very smart. The Tanzanian people have not gone into stages as far as compared to the counterparts of Kenya, even Uganda. Uganda has at least shown some interest of unrest sometimes in the last election and the other election, using pop wine, the opposition leader. If you go to Tanzania, has not it been experienced a bit of election malpractice and election unrest? It is only people in Kenya who have gone through the stages of election unrest as far as from the opposition in 1992. You see, the people of Kenya, being one you are one with experience, now you are elevating yourself to a professor. So Kenyan people are a professor in unrest. They know how to tackle it and they have experience much. But why Kenya have shown some interest to assist their counterparts in Tanzania? Because the Tanzanian people hasn't been pushed through this kind of unrest from the previous time. So the Tanzanian people should have a long way to go up to the time they will achieve their democratic and freedom. You see, the likes of Nyerere, if you can match the likes of Nyerere up to Magufuli, the Tanzanian people are very humble people. They don't like some unrest, mass actions. You can't see them going to the road to protest now. You can't compare. Even the universities in Tanzania, we have not seen them protesting anyway. You can't compare like Tanzania, the people, you can't compare the people of Uganda. The people of Uganda sometimes back, they want to the road to protest the rise of food, the rise of prices of food. And the people of Kenya, you see, they have gone far away to even protest in anything, in any article, maybe to be amended in parliament. So from the unrest in Kenya, compared to unrest in Tanzania, the Tanzanian people have achieved their freedom. And the freedom is what will now manage you when you are protesting. Because in a freedom, you need freedom of protection. That's why in the Kenyan laws, the Kenyan laws guided the Kenyan people on how to protest, even go to court. They will make sure you are being released. Even you go to Tanzania, check Tundu Lissu. Tundu Lissu is an opposition leader and is being held in captivity. If you come in Kenya, it is very unhis to arrest somebody. For example, the former the Red Raila Odinga,
So
the former prime minister.
what would it take then in Tanzania for these protests to end? You say they've got a long way to go, Tanzanians. The President Samia Suluhu Hassan has been sworn in, but the opposition parties have dismissed the election results. Protests are continuing. In fact, they have become deadly and they intensify. What can be done about these protests?
At least the protest in Tanzania, if you can watch it free, it seems that with the time Samia Suluhu will go and release the opposition leaders so that they will share the government equal sharing. But if she doesn't meet to that expectation, she might land the country without even focusing on the opposition. She has power. She has sworn in. She has been shown in. She has power. The government is on her side. She will, and everybody in the government should now lie under Samia Suluhu. Whoever will go against Suluhu will be sacked out. So already she has programmed herself to take over Tanzania in the second term. So nothing else will bar her from learning the country. So that's why I've told you that even if the unrest in the country of Tanzania will emerge to higher lights, unless and otherwise the other communities like Kenya, Uganda, and even the United States will chip in their hand politically. But if we will not do that, then Tanzanian people will suffer a lot under Samia Suluhu, because you see, the opposition are being killed. The opposition protesters are being killed. You can't match the killing extent in Tanzania with the killing extent in Uganda and in Kenya. A bit rise in Tanzania because they are democratic right that is now protected them. So that's the problem with the Tanzanians. So Samia Suluhu is going to learn the country very smart.
What do you make of this inauguration that took place yesterday, as far as limited guests who were there, as well as guests being by invitation only? And if there is a significance to it being held at a military base?
You see, already the military base, the military is under now the leadership of Samia Suluhu. Samia Suluhu is the one who is going to give directives. Because the military, they were the ones who would take the advantage of the protesters and take over the country. But if they didn't manage, how would they now manage to take over where Samia Suluhu has been shown in? They have to keep their guard under Samia Suluhu. You see now, the Tanzanian people who are to be now assisted and rescued by the military. But if the military didn't chip in, you see, some other cases, you see, you can refer and now you can compare to some countries like Kenya sometimes back, when the military was now authorized to get out from the barracks and to patrol on the bases in just to keep peace. But in Tanzania, it was against, it wasn't like that way. But Tanzanians, military just was after to make Samia Suluhu to land the country peaceful.
What do you think would be crucial for President Samia Suluhu Hassan to address in her State of Nation speech and further engagements with ordinary Tanzanians? And I guess that would mean that internet connectivity for those for that hour or an hour and a half would be restored so that she can reach as many people as possible in terms of sharing that info. What would be crucial for her to speak about?
Samia Suluhu, her speech, she's going to speak about the unity of Tanzania. She's going to call those people to play patient, give her time. She's going to look for some other opposition members who are just the second class opposition members, so that she will absorb them to the government. She will leave the biggest and the opposition patroniers and proxoniers who is like Tundu Lissu. To finish Tundu Lissu, she will go to his political supporters, those who are near Tundu Lissu. The political base of Tanzania is going to weaken through under Samia Suluhu. So Samia Suluhu is going to speak about mainly to calm the country down, to calm the people of Tanzania, to promise the people of Tanzania whatever she has not done in the first term. She's going now to tell them that give me time. I will make sure I've heard your voice. I've heard even the Electoral Commission of Tanzania. She's going to promise them that I'm going to change. I'm going to change the electoral system because the market practice we experience it is from the Electoral Commission. While this is now scapegoating, that's escaping. She's going to escape so that she would be looking, says she has no problem. She's in the meaning part for the Tanzanian people. No, she's going to bring herself so that people will look Samia Suluhu as a well-designed leader who has decided to remove them from the problems they are experiencing. So she's going to not to focus much on the elections because she knows what she has done already. So she's going to calm the country down, calm the Tanzanian people, and have a promise on whatever they have raised on the streets. Like, for example, the Electoral Commission is the one where she's going to frame and put the claim on it.
Just finally and briefly, Charles, Amnesty International has been monitoring developments around these elections. There was also SADC who was observing, albeit not much information given on what they were seeing. How should the international community be responding to the events in Tanzania, and how much pressure can Kenya put on Tanzania for that response?
Maybe in Kenya, maybe sanctions. We come from, we haven't experienced some sanctions. Maybe Kenyan people to go to streets like the borderways and make sanctions that no goods should enter to Tanzania, no goods will close to a border to Kenya or to Uganda. And the Amnesty International to assist the people of Tanzania is only for advocacy. Is only to sensitize the people of Tanzania to know their rights and strongly have the support, the pace of the advocacy of the courts. The people of Tanzania, they don't have the advocacy in the courts. They don't have whoever will take care of them where they have been held up in courts. You see, people of Tanzania, even now is in court. You compare even Uganda, even Besigye is in court. But in Kenya, have you seen any opposition leader in court? Have you seen any opposition leader, even a member, even a supporter himself in court? It is because now the Amnesty International has already done everything in Kenya, has now synthesized, educated the members of their rights, of their freedom in Kenya, and now we are now enjoying that freedom. Even Tanzanian people should be educated, center sites, having the advocacy in all of the centers in Tanzania, in institutions, the people institution, all of the institution in Tanzania. Let people of Tanzania understand their right. Let them know their advocacy. Yeah. Let go to that process of protection.
Charles, we're going to leave it there. Thanks again for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Charles Areba is East Africa political analyst, giving us the latest in terms of his observations and what's happening in the community of Kenya who neighbor Tanzania and what people are saying on the ground. I can't imagine this internet connectivity shutdowns and disruptions. I mean, Tlantla was saying for 30 minutes they had. Yeah. When you were there, how long was it restored for?
The whole time I was there, you couldn't get onto Twitter. And
the
I
whole
was
time?
there 3 days. Yeah,
3 days?
Yeah.
Teenagers would die.
No, but it's standard now across the continent. Those regimes, and I'm going to use that word, that want to control. One of the first things they do now is to shut down social media. That's a powerful tool for the citizens. But anyway.
Ready to connect, innovate, and be inspired? It's all happening at Africa's Tech Festival, where Africa's technology meets the world. From the 10th to the 13th of November in Cape Town, join global leaders, investors, and innovators driving the future of Africa's digital economy. Don't miss the continent's biggest week in tech. Get your pass now at africatechfestival.com.
Celebrate life every day. Tune in to Channel Africa. Stay connected through our new website and free mobile app.
Right, let's continue taking a look at the situation in Tanzania. We're now joined by media entrepreneur and civic activist Maria Sarungu Tsehai, who's a founder of the #Change Tanzania movement and also a vocal advocate for press freedom, citizen voice, and democratic reform in Tanzania. Maria, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Good to talk to you again.
Thank you, Peter. Also, we thank you for the opportunity.
All right, so when President Sulu Hassan became president, I perhaps naively thought that a woman might have a softer hand on how things would play out in Tanzania. What's been your experience as a Tanzanian?
I think primarily that was something that I've spoke up very early on. I do have a blog on Medium, where I think one of the first things that I pointed out, and also I had an op-ed in the Washington Post where I pointed out that being a woman is not a qualification. And I remember I had to actually have a lot of heated arguments with a number of feminists who were like, give her a chance because she's a woman. But I very early on already indicated that if somebody is not ready to do actual reforms, then any nice rhetoric is not going to make up for that. On top of that, she, I think, very craftily used that gender aspect. She kept going around being labeled as the first Tanzanian female president, and I think at that time she was like the first or second female president, although she was not elected. So there was all that. Kind of, I would say, camouflage that she was able to wrap herself in. But it only took you a little bit, if you know even remotely Tanzanian politics, to sort of see already her tendencies. Under Magufuli, she was the vice president. There was a lot of myth being spread that she didn't know what happened under Magufuli, which, a lot of the Magufuli inside circle said that is not true. But on top of that, during the 2020 election, she said, even if you vote for other parties, it is CCM that will form government. And I remember that we got really upset about that one particular statement. And we insisted that because of that, it's clear she's not going to be a reformist. But come, 2021, she took over after Magufuli's death. She did not do any reforms. She had very nice rhetorics. She set up committees. She set up task forces. She set up a lot of things that look like reform, but were not reform. And that, I think, is where, for me, the red flag started. The next one was the enforced disappearances, which started almost immediately after she took over. People started disappearing. First, there were young men, businessmen. Then there were not that young businessmen, and then activists. And it grew to hundreds. And I've been blowing the whistle on this since 2021. And everybody has been trying very hard to dismiss it and say these are isolated incidences. They're not related. And it is only this year that I think most of the part of the world started waking up due to the abductions, but also the spectacular political killing of Ali Kibao, who was killed very ruthlessly, tortured, and acid was thrown into his face. That in itself was very shocking, and Samia Suluhu stood out and said, why is everybody making such a big uproar about one person? And said in Kiswahili, kifo ni kifo tu, meaning death is just death. And she said, hundreds die every day from road accidents. That callousness should have been a wake-up call for everyone of what she's capable of. And yet still a lot of people were defending her.
So in your view, where is Tanzania now? Because we're seeing protests, we're seeing pushback, social media is being managed. What are you hearing about what's happening inside the country on the ground in the face of this heavy hand by the authorities?
Well, first of all, I think we need to be very clear. The internet shutdown was a way of the government trying to manage the information flow. And the information flow that they were trying to manage was the massacre that they committed. And it is unfortunate that the international media has been trying to spin a narrative that they usually cloak any of such similar looking conflict and call it post-election violence. What has to be clear, this was not a post-election violence. The violence started before, so there was a pre-election. During election, peaceful protesters went out all over the country. These peaceful protesters organized themselves streets, towns, villages, and they wanted to protest against the election, which everybody knows was not free, was not fair, and nowhere credible. Uh, what happened at that point is that there were two groups of protesters. There were those who protested by sitting at home, and there were those who protested by going out onto the streets. Returning officers at polling stations, and I've been able to communicate with quite a number, and some even sent pictures and descriptions, gave me an example of polling stations, saying where there should have been 200, 300 people registered, only 7 or 20 people turned out. But the returning officers, who are of course still scared for their lives, told me and showed me some with photographs how they were told to stuff the ballot box. If there was like 300 registered, they had to show at least 200 voted, which of course was ridiculous, because you see you can't make up the numbers. There are no photographs you can show with that kind of amount of people if you only have 7 people, and was a form of boycott as well. But on top of that, there were protests, and most of them were young who were doing the protest. They had made a decision. They wanted to go out onto the streets. And, we were trying as much as possible as activists, and civil society, telling them, if you go out, you need to wear a mask, you need to carry your water, carry a flag, carry a banner. And they started out really very peacefully. Immediately, on the 29th, by midday or around 1 o'clock, we started getting news of shooting. Now, because there was so many things happening, we thought that these were like 1 or 2 police were out of hand who got too excited and decided to, shoot around. Little did we know that there was organized squads. Now, these squads are also the same kind of makeup of death and abduction squads that have been terrorizing Tanzanians for years. And these have been fully empowered by the state. It involves police. We now know, and his audio has leaked and he has acknowledged, but there are witnesses, many witnesses, there's even a case against him, is the zonal criminal officer of Dar es Salaam, who is called Faustin Mafwele. He has been named. He has been named by a survivor that he is the one who ordered his execution, and he survived. He has been named. He has bragged. He's the one who was behind the torture of Boniface Mwangi and Agatha Atuaire, who are both Kenyan and Ugandan respectively. Activists were tortured in Tanzania. So he's well known. He's the one who's running these squads all over the country, and it was his squad, together with unknown figures, so-called, we've dubbed them mercenaries. They didn't speak Kiswahili, which I think most of your audience understands that in Tanzania, Kiswahili is the national language, and any Tanzanian has to speak Kiswahili because you don't survive. Like English is an additional language. They didn't speak Kiswahili. They looked different in many aspects. That's what people have described them as. They were wearing masks, and they had really heavy weapon, like heavy artillery weapons. I have all the photos. They were able to shoot through walls, cement walls. I mean, they came to kill. And they were moving around on top of hard-top Land Rovers with darkened windows, with no plate number, and some were sitting on the roof, and they were just shooting randomly. Additionally, there were snipers. So the bloodbath started on the 29th, but in return, the protesting, especially the youth, got so angry that they started attacking symbols of authority. So for them, the symbols of authority included police stations, of course, because they assumed that was the police. They went for CCM buildings because that was also another symbol of authorities. They went for businesses of people that they perceived were enablers or perpetrators of any form of oppression. So in that sense, this rage that people are trying to bring about the infrastructure was not because the youth came out with the intention, but because they were being shot. Now, the narrative, immediately, they tried to control the narrative, but the pictures started coming out of the shooting. And they shut it down thinking that we didn't get them. But because we didn't have enough information, we just received them and we were like, where does this happen and all that? And the internet was shut down. And then the charade started. Once the charade started, they needed sometimes intermittently to open up a little bit the internet. And immediately we started getting all the news from the ground. And now, yesterday, when they had to switch on the internet, they are covering up, they're busy as we speak, covering up hundreds of bodies. They went into houses, they murdered people, they shot indiscriminately. This is a I keep saying that because people think that the last count that we had, which was still at that time, it was coming from hospitals in morgues. There were around 700, 800. This was before they shut down again the internet, and then they started going house to house. I had several messages that came in afterwards, whereby people were pleading and saying they've come into the house, they've taken men who are 15 and above, including old men, and they've just disappeared with them. This is something that we hear has happened in Rwanda, in Congo. This is not normal. And unfortunately, Samia Suluhu is trying to cover up. This is a coup d'etat. She has taken power without the will of the people. She's sworn herself in secrecy on a military base. So tell me, how is that different from somebody who takes power with an army through coup d'etat? It's not different. And therefore, I think the world has to stop sanitizing whatever happened. This was a coup d'etat, this was a massacre, and there was no election. She's an illegitimate president. And if we do not immediately wake up to this, the anger on the ground is big. People are waking up, they're sharing images, and people are angry. But most of all, what is being fueled is Samia Suluhu and her murderous cabal are not acknowledging the deaths. They said nobody died. They said 10 people died. And they do not want to acknowledge that thousands have died. Worse, they're covering up. They are not allowing people to get the bodies. They have shipped out the bodies with trucks. They have buried them in some mass graves. In some cases, we've heard they've taken them to furnaces to burn them. We have heard cases of patients, and I've had many doctors pleading with me to help somehow. They were standing outside hospitals and collecting patients with gunshot wounds and disappearing with them, presumably killing them because they were not in any police station. We are talking about massive massacre. And the world needs to stop talking about reconciliation, talking about normalcy. Nothing is going back to normal after this. How can you say we need to sit down and talk? And by the way, there was no political party involved. They're trying to scapegoat Chadema. They tried to scapegoat the activists. Nobody was involved. Sorry, I'm talking too much. I'm sorry about that.
Maria, we're going to have to leave it there. But what I can promise is that we'll pick this up again because it's too important to ignore. But thanks so much indeed for that initial conversation. Thanks so much for your time.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye, Peter.
Thank you. That's Maria Sarungu Tsehai giving us a horrific update on what's happening in Tanzania. She says that thousands could have been killed already by now. We'll keep a track of that story a little late into the news headlines, but I think listening to that you can understand why. Here's Onelin Sinsi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. The International Criminal Court prosecutors say they are collecting evidence of mass killings and rape after military rapid support forces seized al-Fashir, the last stronghold of the military in Sudan's Darfur region. The ICC has been investigating alleged genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity committed in Darfur since 2005. Nigeria's military continues its campaign against the Lakurawa, an Islamic State-linked terrorist group that has entrenched itself in the country's northwest near the border with Niger. And South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa has appointed Mosotho Miepya as the chairperson of the Electoral Commission of the country. Judge Daya Pillay, who was appointed as an IEC commissioner in 2018, will now serve as a part-time member. Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Nsinsi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Let's get an update from the world of sports. Here's Musubudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you so much, Asanda. Very good morning once again from the sports desk. So Kaizer Chiefs defender Inacio Miguel has welcomed a tough CAF Confederation Cup draw against Zamalek, Al Masry of Egypt, as well as Zambia's Zesco United in Group D. So Amakosi will make their first ever appearance in a CAF Confederation Cup group stages, just 4 years after finishing as runner-ups at the 2021 CAF Champions League tournament, where they finished runner-ups to Al Ali in a more lucrative CAF Champions League. Miguel says a perfect run at home will be key in these matches.
Of course, we're expecting very difficult games. At this time, there is no easy games. We are in the middle of the best teams of Africa, so we expect to work hard and give a good answer to represent well the country. Yeah, definitely. So, in these kind of games, all the games are important, away and home games. But we are aware that getting a good result at home and try to do our best in these games away. It will be very, very difficult, of course, but the most important is to bring good results away and do our best at home.
So for logistical as well as planning purposes, the Chiefs' draw becomes easy with direct flights to Cairo as well as Ndoro. This is another area of the draw that Sporting Director Kaizer Junior Motaung likes.
If you look at going to Egypt and you look at going to Zambia, a short flight, it's something that you hopefully hope for, because traveling and logistics become very important. So, but that aside, Zamalek is a great team with great history. So a big task, very excited. Al Masry also a very difficult opponent. So I think the Egyptian journey is going to be very exciting but very tough.
Onto this now, Ousmane Dembele is fit and available for Paris Saint-Germain's Champions League showdown tonight against Bayern Munich. That's according to coach Luis Enrique. Dembele, who scored in PSG's Club World Cup win over Bayern, as well as netted a stoppage time goal in their 2-0 victory in July, had been nursing a thigh issue but featured briefly against Nice just last weekend. So Bayern enter the clash on a 15-match winning streak across all competitions, including a perfect 9-game run in the Bundesliga since their last defeat to PSG. Both teams are unbeaten in the Champions League this season with identical records as well as goal differences. PSG, unbeaten in their last 8 matches, aim to extend that streak at home against the German champions. Well, South Africa claimed its first ever win at a FIFA Under-17 World Cup tournament, beating Bolivia by 3-1 in Qatar on the tournament's opening day on Monday. So Emil Witbooi and Neo Botlhoko, as well as Sean Els, netted each for Amajimbos, despite an early red card to Siva Palma. Head coach Vela Kumalo's Chargers showed grit as well as determination to power past the South American nation on the tournament's opening day, despite playing with 10 men from the 36th minute. Both goalkeepers were kept busy during the first half, with Bolivia taking 11 shots at South Africa's goal in the first period, while Bolivia faced 6 shots from South Africa. With one win in the bag, Amajimbos will face the host nation Qatar in their second game of this year's tournament on Thursday. And finally, Novak Djokovic has confirmed his participation at the ATP finals in Turin, Italy's Tennis Federation chief Angelo Bengai, having confirmed the news on Monday, saying that this, of course, is now easing concerns that the 24-time Grand Slam champion may pull off the season, was likely to pull out, should I say, of the season finale. The world number 5 Djokovic, who withdrew from the season ender just last year due to injury, skipped the Paris Masters and has not played since losing to qualifier Valentin Vacharot in the Shanghai Masters in the semi-finals last month. So the November 9 to 16 ATP finals feature the world's top 8 players, with Djokovic having won the tournament a record 7 times and last lifting that title back in 2023. And that's a wrap from the sports desk at the Sawa. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, our email address is newsroom@channelafrica.co.za. Alternatively, call us on +27 11714 4459. I'm back with more sports news in the next hour with the On The Move team. For Channel Africa Sport, I am Musibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. 9 to 12 midday Central African Time. On the Move with Palisa Tau and Benjamin Mushatama.
Now, when you go to the hospital, there's medical attention that you need, and that's the only experience you're expecting to have. If you are a transgender person, sometimes those experiences can be marred by the demand of trying to understand your gender, your sexuality, and not particularly getting the assistance that you need.
One time, I was sexually abused by someone who used to live next door to my house. So when I went to the police to report, I was in a weave, I was wearing a dress, and when I got there, the police person that helped me said to me, obviously we're gonna rape you because why do you walk around looking like trying to be a woman when you are a man? And after that, the person just walked scot-free.
How do you deal with that? Because there's a double barrel abuse there. So it's not even double barrels, there's kind of multi-dimensional forms of abuse.
I think one thing that I will tell you about trans people is we are strong, not because we want to be strong, but because we don't have an option. It is what it is. Because the struggles that we face each and every day are like unimaginable.
Keeping you on the know and on the move.
Let's get a final business news update right here on Rise and Shine with Chanduko Ligege.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning. Head of Programs at the Institute for Social Accountability, TISA Kenya, Alexandra Riti says the mutual agreement between the Kenyan government and the IMF to not proceed with the ninth and final review of a $3.6 billion program has affected the government's purse negatively. Riti says the Kenyan government now relies on heavy domestic borrowing, which means it now competes with the private sector for limited resources within the economy. Currently, talks between Kenya and the IMF for a new funding program have been delayed with no clear timelines or indication of a way forward. Riti says at the moment the private sector is not showing signs of growth.
We are losing jobs, and therefore the economy is on a slowdown. The hope is that if we were to get into this program, then there will be a reduction in the level of government operations in the private space, which would then leave enough resources for private sector to grow, therefore increasing the available jobs for ordinary Kenyans.
Flights Affairs says it does not anticipate any disruption to its flight schedule despite the cabin crew strike. The action started this morning. The striking workers that the South African Cabin Crew Association represents are demanding higher wages and the revision of the roster. Flights Affairs says more than two-thirds of its cabin crew have committed to continue working. This comprises of non-union members and union members who have formally accepted the company's 5.7% wage increase offer. In other news, the National Union of Mine Workers and Eskom have started wage negotiations. The power utility is offering a 15% wage increase. The union's demands include $404 a month housing benefit and the company's medical aid contribution of 80%. The current 7% multi-year agreement will end in June next year. The union's national spokesperson is Ribuwani Mamburu.
A figure justified by high costs of living. We stand in solidarity with other unions that are organizing at Eskom in demanding that negotiations remain within the Central Bargaining Forum. Eskom and government must understand that the unbundling of Eskom must not be used to unbundle workers' unity and collective bargaining rights, as members prefer to negotiate in the Central Bargaining Forum.
A strike by Tunisian bank workers demanding pay rises has halted all financial transactions as the country struggles with an economic crisis. Lines formed at cash points as the walkout started yesterday, but customers said many of the machines are broken. Locals are struggling to access basic commodities such as medicines, while some goods are short in supply. The UGTT union called the strike after talks over the pay and working conditions broke down with the Banking Council, which represents all public and private banks. The union says rising living costs have eroded employees' purchasing power and is demanding urgent adjustments to salaries. The White House says it will use emergency funds to provide food aid to more than 40 million Americans. This is in the midst of no end in sight to the government shutdown. Low-income families will now receive at least half the money they usually get. The Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program costs about $8 billion. Monique Lewis, who lives in New York, is one of the recipients.
I think things will be like a little tight, but I mean, I don't think we'll like go hungry, but when I think about other people, like, elders and people disabled, seniors who are not working, just on fixed incomes, I think is like really disturbing, that this is happening to me, and particularly around the holiday season.
$1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,436 naira. In Botswana, 13 pula 70. Kenya, the dollar is 1.20 Zambia, 22 kwacha 8. BRICS countries, $1 in Brazil is at 5.38. In Russia, 79 rubles 55. India, 80 rupee 80. China, 71.12. South Africa, 17 rand 31 cents. $1 is trading at 76 pence to the British pound, 87 to the euro. Commodities, gold is trading at $3,982, platinum at $1,560 per ounce. The price of Brent crude oil at $64.69 a barrel. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za, or you can call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I am Chanduko Ligege.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective. The voice of the continent, now online, with all your sports fixtures, lifestyle, and more. From Cape to Cairo, Dakar to Dar es Salaam, rise and shine with Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda on Channel Africa.
With Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda, rise and shine. We take a look at this story now. South Africa's drive toward universal health coverage, UHC, has received strong international support, with experts highlighting its potential to transform the country's healthcare landscape. Speaking to Channel Africa at a public panel hosted by the Department of Health, the London School of Economics and Political Science, and the Clinton Health Access Initiative at the University of Pretoria, Professor Alistair Maguire from the London School of Economics underscored the importance of introducing universal healthcare in South Africa. Professor Maguire noted that while funding challenges persist globally, political will and investment in health and education remain key to achieving lasting progress.
Well, I think it's vital. It's absolutely important in at least three respects. The first one being that universal healthcare coverage gives financial security to the whole of the population, that once something traumatic like an illness happens, the treatment costs of that illness are covered, and they know that for sure. The second thing is it improves equality within the population, because it's been shown that as people get ill, their incomes go down, they fall out of the labour force, they maybe even go into debt because of the payments for illness. And universal healthcare coverage can actually produce more equality, because it will cover all these, the funding of the treatment. And obviously the poorer people need that funding more than the wealthier people. So it's a great leverage for equality within South Africa as well. And the third thing is, through both of these means, the financial security and helping address inequalities in South Africa, it brings solidarity to South Africa. And that's what happened after apartheid went. You had solidarity, you were working together, you were achieving things, and hopefully you'll do the same with the UHC as well.
And tell us, how has the UK done with the NHS? We have seen somehow it has been a bit controversial, but just to break it down, how is it doing so far, so that maybe we can draw lessons, we as South Africans, as we are also going through a very traumatizing time. I mean, we have people who are pushing back from really this very important initiative.
So the UK, like every other country in the world, is suffering from an economic crisis just now. The economic crisis has really been going on since 2008-2009, when the banking crisis hit. Median wages and income median income, median wages, have basically levelled off in the UK since 2008. So the average person in the street hasn't grown wealthier over time. We've got an ageing population, so it's a bit different from South Africa as well in terms of demographics, but that's meant that there's been more pressure put on the healthcare system at a time when we're also, like South Africa, being pushed to get our debt levels down because we, in the UK, incurred massive debt levels in reaction to the ongoing economic crisis and the COVID crisis, and also withdrawing from Europe through Brexit. We've incurred large debt, which the Treasury in particular wishes to pay off before getting into expenditure programs. And that's a similar situation that you have in South Africa as well. There's a prioritization of debt rather than supporting expenditure programs. And that's a political decision. It's a decision that the Treasury enact, but it's a political decision. So we need to see some realignment away from the debt recovery is being pursued with your tax base towards spending that on productive investments like education and health.
The funding model, how did you manage to come together with the funding model to ensure that it's seamless? When it took off, there's no stopping and worries about where are we going to get the funding.
So it's all tax-based within the UK. That's an issue to an extent because it gets into a political fight as to how to allocate the tax, and sometimes health wins, sometimes it doesn't. It's certainly levelled off just now in terms of its funding. There's a 3% growth rate in funding through the allocation of taxes, but that's probably not enough to cover the demands, which are growing at about 4.5% per annum. So we are having a bit of a problem with that, and maybe another way to do it is through social employment insurance, like the German system. But then, of course, if your productivity goes down, then that leads to the contribution rate going down in a social insurance system as well. So there are pros and cons to different ways of funding universal healthcare coverage, but as long as the political will is there, you can achieve the best benefits package that you can.
Ukatili wa kijinsia unaharibu maisha na kutenga jamii. Hutokea nyumbani, shuleni, kazini na mara nyingi kwa ukimya. Lakini huwezi kuendelea. Ukiona, ongea. Ikiwa unaumia, funguka, kwa sababu kutofanya lolote sio chaguo. Sikiliza vituo vyote 19 vya redio kuanzia Jumatano ya tarehe 23 Julai kwenye mijadala, ushauri, tamthilia, maonyesho ya elimu na mahojiano na wataalamu, manusura, watunga sheria na nchi nzima iliyoathirika na ukatili wa kijinsia kwenye vituo vyako pendwa vya redio. Piga simu 0800 428 428 ili kuripoti unyanyasaji au kupata msaada. GBV ikomeshwe na wewe. Ujumbe huu umeletwa kwenu na shirika la SABC.
Wake up with gratitude, hope, and the African spirit. Channel Africa, now easier to access than ever before. WhatsApp us on +27 63 406 9126. A fresh morning, a fresh perspective. Stay tuned to Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
It's a little bit before 9 o'clock, and Egypt has just opened an amazing museum. I think over 10,000 artifacts. You've never been to Cairo?
No,
not
yet.
You've got to do Cairo. You've got to do Egypt.
Uh-huh.
The pyramids, well talked about, but the museum. So on this day, 1922, Tutankhamun's tomb was discovered. British archaeologist Howard Carter and his team discovered the steps leading to the tomb of the Egyptian pharaoh Tutankhamun, King Tut as many people call him, in the Valley of the Kings, and the tomb found nearly intact, contained countless priceless artifacts and revolutionized the world's understanding of ancient Egyptian history. It is amazing how they mummify bodies and how they've managed to keep them. So if you ever get to Egypt, the pyramids and the museum, and then you can come home.
Really? Yeah, well, it's going to be on my bucket list. Somebody made a joke about with horror movies, when a zombie chases after you, you know what it's going to do to you. But what does a mummy do when it chases you?
What does it do?
Nobody knows. Is it just going to beat you up? The zombie will bite you. You turn into a zombie. What does the mummy do in the horror movies?
No idea. But they had the technology then to embalm bodies. It's quite a thing.
Yeah. So Benjamin joining us in studio. Good morning to tell us what to expect today.
How are you?
We're good. How are you?
Good. Please don't mummify me.
What do you want to be, buried or cremated?
I don't know. I haven't really thought about it. No,
I'm very clear. I want to be cremated.
Me too. Yeah. I'm also very clear.
What's up with that decision?
Organ donor as well. Everything is written somewhere.
Yeah.
My family knows what to do.
All right. Fantastic. Cool.
I think that's a show for you to do.
Yeah. Yeah,
fantastic. I've given you a show idea.
Yeah. I'll put it forward to the producer. All right, guys. Today we're going to be looking at our In the Cubicle feature, where we look at workplace issues, right? And we're going to be looking at something where in some workplaces it's allowed, in others it's not. That's alcohol in the workplace. We know in some industries, drinking alcohol in the office is kind of mainstream. It's actually promoted. It's something that you kind of do, you know, especially when you think about the
like
Friday drinks,
okay,
you know.
When they go to the
sometimes you can just walk into an office and just grab a drink.
Really?
In
Which
some
industries?
Advertising agencies, marketing
I worked
industries.
at South African Airways in the early 90s. And we would work until 5. After 5, we would rotate in which manager's office we went to, and we would drink until 6, and that was after hours every single day.
Wow. Yeah. So in some industries, it's pretty normal, right? And we're going to be speaking about that, what's legally and ethically allowed when it comes to alcohol drinking in the job, and what happens when that culture becomes a bit risky, and can it enter into a discriminatory territory?
I think it's dangerous, personally.
I also think so.
I really
There's so many lines that
idea.
could be crossed. I mean, besides, you know, we talk about gender-based violence, as you say, things like harassment and things like that. When people are under the influence, that could happen. But also the respect that you will have for your colleagues. If you are together drinking, I can imagine the kind of conversations that come up, and then now you must be calling this person boss on a Monday morning. There are too many bloodlines.
I think what is acceptable is to have a canteen bar which has its own location. That you can open to the staff, that they can go to after hours, but never during hours. And also that maybe you can help by subsidizing prices and things like that.
Or maybe just create like a token system where you only can have maybe 2 a day or something like that, to limit the other dynamics that you have highlighted, Asanda.
I think it's got to be separate. It's got to be seen as like a social club.
Okay.
But it is not part of work. It is a separate entity that work has provided for you, because, as you say, there's blurring of lines. And then you go back to the office drunk. You don't know what's going to happen after that.
Definitely would not work in our industry.
No.
Because after hours for us is literally 9 a.m.
Talking about 9 a.m. It's 9 o'clock right now, which means it's time for us to say goodbye. Thanks for joining us. And what's next?
It's the news with Onel and Cincy. Goodbye from us. We'll catch up with you as Rise and Shine tomorrow, bright and early, 6 till 9.
SABC News. The African Perspective.